What's up, guys? This is your friend, and we are back with a new fanfic part 1. Which is What If Temari's First Meeting with Shikamaru Was a Disaster Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel Anime Hub 1.2 for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Monday mornings truly were a blessing and a curse. An exciting new week of challenges and tedious work, dreadful days spent indoors creating and succeeding in life, her ambitions and desires taking her away from a place she once called home. Temari Sabakuno played to win, never one to turn down a task no matter the difficulty, no matter the time she would sacrifice for it. Stepping into a competitive field like hers had been the goal, the dream to sit on that final floor and gaze down into the city of Konoha. To earn the position she had worked her entire life for and make it a reality. Though currently, she was anything but calm and collected. She was late. 8 minutes to be exact. Temari ran like a clock, every moment spent at work planned ahead of time, each minute of the day meant for a task to be settled by her confidence and rightful leadership alone. Everything had to be perfect. As if the bad luck of a late awakening followed her, she finally remembered that she had caught the sides of the door on her car earlier, now knowing that today really was Monday. Just great, Temari muttered with a huff, coffee held in her left hand, leaning down to glare at the tear in her stocking, a brush of her hand only making the whole worse as she forced herself to push through the doors of Yamanaka Marketing Industries. The 12th floor, her destination for now, a meeting that held great importance for her future just seconds away. As the doors of the elevator threatened to slide closed, she blindly stepped in, fixated on staring down her skirt at the tear that would ruin her day, a mishap so small that it would put her in the mood she knew would keep her eyes on fire all day. Had she only been ready for the trouble her mistake would make. As she walked in, one red heel before the other, she fell, more specifically, fell into someone. A move so sudden and alarming that she almost didn't feel the hands holding her arms, pushing her just enough away from being caught in the mess she had created in the space between them. Spilled coffee soaking one, but leaving the other untouched. Are you kidding me, you son of a? Just biting the curse on her tongue, she faced her obstacle, someone who dared to be in her way. Can't you watch where you're going? Glaring up at the man, his brows quickly knitting together to shoot her an equally irritated look back. You should watch where you're going, a stumbled step back when she leaned forward and snapped twice as hard. The courteous thing to do would have been not standing right in front of the doors, idiot. One last spat and she caught herself. Seconds, she only had seconds. You walked into me, woman, he glared back down to the stain on his white button-up, the addition of coffee now giving it a beige hue, mumbling under his breath about how something was a drag, the last of it cut off from her tension. Stepping past him to the back of the elevator, she waved off the pointless argument, seconds away from where she needed to be, she took each one to heart as she began to fix the mess. Brainless interns, Temari huffed, uncaring if he heard, kicking her heels off and setting her purse beside her, engrossed in her own frustrations to care who was near her. Picking at the side of her leg until she could grip the edge of the stocking and pull it down under her skirt, bare legs worked better than an imperfect exterior, and today was too important for any screw-ups. Whether it was her fault or his. I'm not an intern, muttered as the man glanced back subtly, eyes widening when he noticed what she was doing. Suddenly the spilled coffee didn't bother him so much. Eyes falling as she bent down just far enough to grab the rest of the stocking she had peeled off her long tan legs, the skirt he decided was now shorter than before. My eyes are up here, pervert. His gaze quickly snapped up to hers at the warning, the heat behind the exchange leaving him burned. And just as quickly as he had looked, he turned away to stare at the door, an uncomfortable clearing of his throat, keeping quiet a hidden blush and forgetting that he still had coffee all over his suit. One more floor and she slipped into her heels again, ripped stockings hidden in her purse, taking a step towards the door with a huff, gaining back her composure, needed for her important task ahead. The man beside her, forgotten, but remaining stiff, staring back at the doors, afraid to look in her direction, and when her floor came and she stepped out, his head turned down, only his gaze following after her form instead, a hidden grin threatening to pull at his lips. Troublesome. Monday's a blessing and a curse. Monday, 7:59 a.m. Prepared for war, Wielding a dangerously hard look and powerful stride with each step into the room, the oval table and chairs spread around the sides of her battlefield and inside her opponent, a bitch. Running late this morning, Sabakuno. The damn witch herself, Tayuya Sakin, already seated back closest to the head of the table, to where the final boss would be, to where that goal ended. Still beat Kakashi, she stopped her steps and took her spot across from her. A rival if she wanted to force it, simply a pesky rock that kept falling into her shoe. Decent at her job, but lacking that little charm that would have the crowd roaring at the end of the show. Tall and hair as red as Temari's lips, tied back hair as neat as her own, they would acknowledge their disdain in the other with forced toothless smiles. Kakashi is always late, Tayuya scoffed, absently straightening her folder before her as the door squeaked with a new occupant. Not today, ladies, strolling casually as usual, no haste in his steps or worry about fixing the one stray white IR plastered on his forehead, Kakashi nodding his greeting to each department head. Well, look who decided to show up before the big boss did, Temari threw back at him, just flashing a snarky grin to his slow smirk. I'm still here before Mr. Yamanaka. He shrugged, taking the spot a chair away from hers, so personal goal achieved today. You strive for so little, Hitaki. Temari deadpanned, unimpressed by her colleagues' lack of interest in the competitive nature of their work. Between the two other heads of their marketing division, Kakashi preferred his work to be slow and steady, not minding if he took an extra day, but always coming back with perfect results. As much as she hated to admit it, she liked his mild temperament and careful calculations to anything involving numbers and risks when it came to potential clients. A seasoned veteran of nearly 10 years. Second to her if she had to decide now. The job still gets done, he shrugged, sipping at his coffee carefully, lacking finesse and anything past a sluggish sigh. Better than your team, poor group looks drained, the first shot of the day, Temari rolled her eyes at the attempt, you probably suck all the souls out of those people. My department has twice the work you do, Sakin, so I know you won't understand what working hard looks like. Quote. Two false smiles, a fourth entering to break it up. With the fight paused, a new voice entered, bright, cheerful, and full of energy for the day ahead. Inochi Yamanaka, president and owner of the company, a man who knew what people wanted and a team at his back he called family to help him I have the top 10 status as one of the best marketing firms out there. Just one spot down to Sharingan Industries, their true rivals. Good morning my three favorite department directors, what a fine group of such hard and dedicated working people. Everyone called out their greeting and followed the man as he stood at the end of the conference table, sharing his wide grin with the group. I'm sure we all had a great weekend. If you're about to bring up our golf tournament, Kakashi began, a sly little smile sent to Temari when she rolled her eyes. No, Inochi chuckled, you definitely beat me fair and square, Kakashi, win is all yours. Settling he glanced between the trio, but back to business and time is money as they say. So, he clapped his hands, another grin, with Suon's retirement coming up next year I'd like to make it known to my three directors that her spot as CEO will be opening up soon. Of course the leaders knew, it's all their little lackeys gossiped about for the past couple of weeks. Stance and coworkers all buzzing about the change in power, of which one of their leaders would sit on the side of Air boss, promising hopes and dreams for paper. Temari wanted just that. I will be choosing one of you three based on your performances these next few months. He looked between each of them. I want to make sure you are reminded it's not just quantity, it's quality we are after. We want people to come back to us, to know us like we are best friends. I want a leader we can count on to keep that motto going. The speech slowed, a hesitant knock on the opened wooden door, unable to stop it as the group turned their attention to the noise. To him, the guy from the elevator. Temari bit her tongue so quickly so swore she tasted blood, the curse threatening to slip out as he made his way in. His jacket buttoned up and tie hiding most of the stain, neat tied back black hair, a professional clean look, but a lack of finesse as if suit and tie seemed to suffocate him. Who would dare interrupt a meeting of this importance? And why was Inochi so excited to see him? Just in time, Inochi grinned broadly, gesturing to the young man with open arms. Shikamaru stepped forward and visibly straightened to take Inochi's hand, but instead was taken into an uncomfortable embrace. Just long enough to make things awkward, giving each head a chance to glance at one another before looking back to their boss as he addressed them. Everyone, this is my nephew, Shikamaru Nara, not blood related of course, but close enough. He'll be our newest head representative in the marketing department with you three. Silence. Excuse me. The words slipped out before Temari could cover her mouth, ignoring the eyes turned to her and foe. Seeing hers off of the new arrival back to Inochi to play nice again. Miss Sabakuno. Inochi raised a brow in question to the outburst. Mr. Yamanaka. She began evenly, keeping her voice light, just on the line between pleasant and spiteful. It's just we aren't supposed to be accepting new employees this late in the quarter. She turned a sharp look to Shikamaru, catching his eyes briefly and forcing ice to form. No new hires, you said it yourself. Quote, I can always make an exception for my best friend's son. He patted Shikamaru's back, a man who died under the praise as Inochi boosted, fresh out of college and ready to gain some on-the-job experience. He grinned wide, always friendly, but lacking when it came to spotting the obvious disapproval in his department heads. Shikamaru offered Inochi a tight smile, forced and awkward as the group around looked among each other, with Kakashi being the first to speak. So is he going to be shadowing one of us? Or are you going to throw him in the deep end? Temari didn't bother to hide the glare now, curious in her threat, tapped her neatly done French tips onto the table, the sound echoing during the decision. Haven't decided yet, but I know that this will play a factor in my final decision. You three are my best, so I want him to learn from the best, he winked back at them. That caught their attention, even Kakashi straightened, only enough to not roll his head back. Turning away, he guided Shikamaru out the room, leaving the trio to sit in silence for only a few seconds. This just got interesting. Tayuya smirked and stood, Temari mimicking the gesture, though not as amused as her rival. Interesting or trouble for us, Temari scoffed, fixing her jacket cuffs and readjusting the thin old gold watch on her wrist, the clasp barely holding on with the jerking movements. Guess we'll have to see how the kid does. Kakashi grabbed the cup he came in with and took a sip, looking bet. Eat them. And the bad luck continued amongst the uncertainty. Miss Sabakuno, might I have a word with you in my office? Inochi called back in, her frozen state melted into a firm nod and grin that fell as soon as she walked out the room. Feeling like the principal had just called her into his office, but knowing that each step she took beside him to that final floor would determine her future. I thought we discussed me being promoted, sir. She let it slip out as soon as the door shut behind them. Inochi let out a sigh and chuckled as he strode past his velvet seating area in his office towards the grand wooden desk in the middle, going for his comically large leather chair. There is something missing, he hummed back to her as she quickly caught up to take her seat on the other side of the desk. Now alone she let some of the stiff tension relax in her shoulders. Not her first time seeing the carefully crafted oak designs of the room, ping ancient bookshelves and deep purple rugs only the rich could afford. She took her spot before the man who saw potential in her before she could even see it herself. That was 3 years ago, hesitant to make that first move and finding more than just a job in the end. Missing how? Demanding just enough not to sound harsh, friendly if you tilted your head a bit. Well, Temari, I'd like to see you be more of a team player in the next few months, just enough restraint that she wouldn't gap openly at him. You might be my best marketing promoter, hell, UCA. And sell water to the ocean, but your social status in the office is, for lack of better terms, he glanced away uncomfortably, searching for a better word, but settling with one that still made her chest heave under her clean blouse, lacking. Quote, lacking. She managed calmly, the word barely making it past her bared grin. You only attend events with customers, never engage with anyone outside of that, you take on everyone's work, and I do appreciate it, but there is a reason there are 3 of you pitching the customers. Quote, well, I am trying to sell to clients, not our employees, Mr. Yamanaka, and as far as our other heads go, we work well enough with each other. Yes, but as my CEO you'll be managing multiple different teams, so you'll need to be a part of the team in order to gain their trust, and vice versa. You have to trust them to handle things as well. Trust. She couldn't help that it came out like a question, as if she didn't know what the word meant. You're a bit. He hesitated and offered an attempt at a comforting smile, how to put it lightly, unapproachable sometimes. You run your department like a military operation, effective, but strict. It's not great for moral. He raised his hands quickly in defense. Nothing wrong with your work ethic. You've always been perfect, never failed a deadline or even made a mistake, but, that dreaded word, perfect, she stiffened. Despite her restraint, I just want to see you succeed in all fields, be more well-rounded, if you will. You have been my best employee for 2 years running and I want to see a third year. The investment I made in you has been amazing, your loyalty, inspirational. But use some of that charm you have with our buyers on our teams. He raised his fist, firmly shaking it with his broad grin. Imagine what you could do if you had not just me, but the entire industry at your back, just like Suand has everyone's trust. Quote, consider it done, Mr. Yamanaka. She resisted the urge to groan when he clapped his hands. That's the spirit, Temari. A simple hurdle to jump through, she could manage this easily, so close to that finish line she could practically smell the brisk air from the top. One more thing, the GL shattered around her, her smile twitching, threatening to fall as the hurdle suddenly became an enormous mountain. My nephew will be your partner during this quarter. He's new to the business, but I assure you he's not just for show, he's a pretty smart kid and I'm sure you can use him in your department to help out the seasonal workload. He smirked. He's a decent strategist, and I know how much you like things planned out in advance. Why my department? Asking slowly, keeping that professional mask glued on for just a moment longer. Because unlike Kakashi and Tayuya, your department has never made a mistake, and I'd like my nephew to learn from the best. His grin turned up even brighter, as if he'd had the greatest idea known to mankind. A part of her wished to throw the stapler at him for the fact he seemed to be blind to her darkened stare. Plus you can work on being part of the team, so to me is a two birds one stone situation. He chuckled and leaned back in his chair, good-natured and kind. She knew that about her boss. He had no ill intent, but this was just breaking the seams to her very limited composure. What do you say, Temari? He smiled, lacking any bad fortune with his request, and she realized what this was. Are you up for the challenge? Quote, a challenge. Temari did love those. One thing she could always count on, Inochi having her back since the first time he shook her hand and told her she was perfect for this part in his company. A company that was truly like a family, taking care of each member from the top to the bottom and br. Eating a fierce loyalty in her to the name of Yamanaka Marketing Industries. Looking forward to it, sir. The smile forced back, showing less teeth, even though she hated the way it pulled at her lips. She knew inside she could do this. An obstacle to conquer, that's what her boss had given her, or possibly one that could help climb her ranks faster. A challenge, she did like those. Temari Sabakuno, CEO of Yamanaka Marketing Industries, Inochi hummed and he leaned back in his chair testing the tempting title. Has a nice ring to it, she admitted, a subtle grin following, less forced, and more pleasant, more approachable. It does, doesn't it? He crossed his arms and grinned back as she bowed his head respectfully. I won't fail you, sir. The grand feel of something as simple as an office space gave Shikamaru a sense of purpose, hidden behind his curious look around the place. His uncle's company, his father's investment in him finally paying off. Born to be great, realizing quickly the drag of what hard work got him. More work. He'd take it though, he'd handle it. He'd invest his time into the company those before him created for their children. While his best friend took off for culinary school, and his, not by blood, sister took to using her looks to follow in her mother's modeling career, he took the troublesome task of being molded to continue on the company name. Forced really, but he wouldn't give his mother the satisfaction of seeing him quit now. That little thought tucked away with the quiet hum of the office. Simple open layout. A grand view of the street 18 floors below on one side, desks and cubicles in the middle, people at work, a team nagging calls and spreadsheets, boards and layouts for possible ads to be created. Unsurprisingly, he saw Ino's face on a magazine cover, her latest endeavors taking her across seas for an amazing opportunity photo shoot she had said last week. One wide hallway connected to where the elevator was, and a reception desk in front, behind it a short mousy woman by the name of Marjorie, simply offering a welcoming smile and her gaze glued to a screen before her when he had entered to meet his new eyes stand alongside Inochi before his uncle ran of F to his top office on the 25th floor. One down from the rooftop patio he used to attend as a kid when the company would have their yearly parties and balls, all planned of course by the mothers of the children. 3 doors in the big space around him, only catching the conference room to his right and the office with a new name tag on it to its side. His own office was renamed that same morning, almost making the first day jitters settle in his bones finally. Shikamaru went to check the next office, but was finally brought back from his observation to reality. That being an old friend he hadn't seen in nearly 2 years, his extra schooling taking him past just a mere graduate. All degrees needed for the field of marketing, the work over the past few years burned to his memory whether he wanted it there or not. The way this company actually ran, just a childhood experience he never could get away from. Nearly 20 years old, he still had a memory of his uncles and father opening up the doors for the first time when he was a 4-year-old kid, Ino to one side and Choji the other. A family company as their fathers had said. Easy work. Kiba grinned now, turning Shikamaru's attention back to him, his quiet observation of the place he'd be spending 40 hours a week at coming to an end as he met the familiar grin of his friend. Isn't it, boss? Quote, I really hate that title. He faked a dramatic shudder, leaving Kiba to chuckle. I'm not going to be your boss, I'm just going to be your boss's partner. Yeah, well, you decided to spend 2 more years back in uni, so within the 4 walls of this place, you're the boss, Shikamaru, I mean Mr. Nara. The dramatic salute, like catching up with old times before he was made to glare down at numbers and lines on paper, so insignificant to most, but it's here his future laid. Asuma would be proud, he thought. Had no choice, either this or have my parents on my back about doing something with my life. He added quicker and with a cringe in his shoulders, and please don't call me Mr. Nara. Kiba, I'm not my dad. Quote, so you haven't changed a single bit since school. A short exchange and Kiba let out a long sigh of relief. Thank God, man. In corporate jobs are the worst, they really change people. Then why work here? Quote, pays great and hours are decent, and the bonuses Mr. Yamanaka gives us are amazing. He paused and grimaced. Unless there's a deadline, then we can get stuck in here for weeks, working and working and working. He blew out a held breath, exhausted with the mention. Curious, but not enough to ask why. We've missed you, man, haven't heard from you in almost a year. You know why, Shikamaru muttered, turning away to glance around the space. Open and light flooding from the sky around them. He was glad at least he now stood where he was needed, where his childhood dreams of clouds stopped and his future as a leader began. Though he did enjoy the view of the sky from this angle, that habit hard to break even now. Alright, I'll show you around the place, since I'll be your new secretary. Kiba winced, making a careful suggestion, maybe a new title for myself. I stand, Shikamaru offered. That sounds better. He pointed a finger at him sternly, but in no way shape or form will I be getting you cough. Hey, I bought you beer when you couldn't, you owe me. Shikamaru let a sly grin rise at the reminder of freshman year. A few friends all failing in buying alcohol, except for Shikamaru who had perfected the careless look of indifference and played off his fake ID like a professional. One he still kept tucked away with a few other trinkets from his youth. I don't even remember my senior year thanks to you, Kiba deadpanned, ready for another joke until the shout. Mistress. Suddenly the light breezy air of the place shifted, a storm was approaching. Why is everyone panicking? Shikamaru leaned away as one of the boards came rolling by, a pair of fearful workers going to hide in the conference room on the other side. He noticed Sakura clear the table of folders and call out for a specific one. Now he knew for a fact something dangerous was approaching when she lost it. Sakura Haruno had been tied to him just as close as Kiba had been back then, a fearless rival to Ino and the second smartest person in the room. If he only compared her to himself. Firm in her can-do attitude and ambitions as could be, she was one of the only women who didn't get on his nerves, at least when Ino wasn't there. The fact that she was panicking to find that precious folder made the fear crawl up his spine, one would think a Mons. Tear was approaching. Boss is coming. Kiba practically threw himself at his desk beside the office he had been given, gathering papers and dropping loose ones all around the sides. Inochi. Shikamaru glanced back down the hall, expecting his uncle, but getting a shuddering reminder at his back. No, Miss Sabakuno. He knew that name, the reminder still stained on his white button-up. Inochi promised him a partner, someone he could learn from for a little while before he got warmed up to the feel of the job, but he hadn't expected her. From the one incident and darkened look in that conference room earlier, he was sure she hated him. That troublesome woman from the meeting this morning. His eyes widened back to Kiba as he began to grab at loose papers from the floor, panicked as the others, only stopping before Shikamaru when he asked, "This is her department. I'm working with her." "Yeah, I thought you knew that." He gave an apologetic shrug and went back to work. "She's one of the head marketing directors here, our direct boss, but we call her the cruel mistress, because well," he paused and tensed uncomfortably, "Shish. Ease mean." Kiba rushed to shove a stack of papers into his file cabinet, his attempt at organizing failing as he crinkled the ends, even shutting it didn't help hide the mess. "Also, she's terrifying to be around, especially when we mess up. Runs this entire department like it's a military operation. Sometimes, like some kind of drill sergeant. I have to partner with her." He just managed to wipe the surprise from his face and turn it into discomfort. Like an alarm, the bell to the elevator rang, and everyone went still in the office. "She's here," Sakura whispered loudly. Matsuri squeaked beside her as they rushed down the aisles towards the hall to the elevator just as the doors opened and one red heel made way onto the pristine white tile. Her first victim, Sakura. "Haruno, is it done?" Her sharply called name, Sakura already began showing the report she had been tasked with as she followed at Temari's side. "It's all ready for your 2 o'clock, Miss Sabakuno." Handing the file to Temari, she didn't bother to open it and instead handed it off to Matsuri at her side. With a firm nod, Sakura was dismissed and the attention now turned on the click of those heels as she made it down the hall. "Matsuri." "Yes, ma'am." The mousy-haired woman quickened her pace to keep beside Temari as she ped the hallway heading towards the desks, the stomp of her heels echoing on the marble, sounding like drums before a battle, keeping everyone staring back at their screens to avoid being on her direct T-war path. Shaped in clothes that just fit her curved frame perfectly, her steps made in a sway and hips moving in a dangerous way. Hair pinned up and bangs neat across her flawless features. Dressed in white and black, a perfect balance of power, a sharp black coat to follow the same shade of RKNESS in her skirt and each step made in blood-red heels. The same shade as her lipstick. Push my 9 o'clock meeting with the others to 10, and have my lunch with my next victim from Sharingan pushed to 1, those cowards can't seem to send anyone worth talking to. Her heels stomped louder as she ped the hunkered-down workers on her runway walk to her main office in the back. "Don't make me remind you again that I want Sakin's final edits on my desk in an hour at the latest." Quote, "But ma'am, Kimimaro said she isn't supposed to." "I don't care. I want those edits and accounts. Steal them if you have to. We can't afford a mistake this early into the quarter. And I don't trust that woman to handle it." Quote, "Yes, ma'am." Matsuri nodded quickly, nervously agreeing, but tapping frantically at her tablet as she rushed behind Temari, her heeled steps taking a sudden stop at the end of the lined cubicles. So quiet now that a pin could be heard if dropped. Suddenly turning sharply, the turn making Matsuri scramble to stop and not run into her, Teals began searching the office as she spoke. "So where is this new partner of mine?" The simple question sounded more dangerous than it needed to be. Though he had watched the display with a silent awe and prick of fear in his shoulders, he now understood why everyone had panicked earlier. "He's with his eye stant, in Izuka." Matsuri gingerly pointed toward the other side of the room, towards him and his nervous eye stant. Her focus set on Shikamaru and he didn't know why, but he froze, as if forced to, like a deer caught in the headlights awaiting its tragic end. He was sure that the damn air stilled in her presence with the look she gave, not even close to the heat he felt this morning during the coffee incident, but those eyes hooked his attention before he could even give it. Like a cold fire, warming yet freezing, her target caught in her sights and her menacing steps making their way towards him. The clicking on the keyboard stopped, eyes watching as if a fight would break out. A part of him tensed, ready to give in on the first remark, but something told him the first move was just a fake, a test. Inochi's not by blood nephew, Mr. Nara. One drop in her gaze and something sparked inside him. It's Shikamaru, he bothered to correct her. Well, Nara, she purposefully emphasized his last name and glanced at Kiba beside him. Inuzuka should have settled you into your office and shown you the introduction books by now. Her eyes narrowed, turning down to his closed cabinet, wrinkled pages sticking out from the hastily closed drawer. She gave Kiba a quick glare at his nervous grin. Our meeting is at 11, so don't be late, and while you're at it, do something about that coffee stain. I like things neat and tidy around here, and you look like a mess. When she looked back at him, he swore his heart nearly jumped from his chest. The smile that followed was downright terrifying, each side's delicate curve and flash of teeth. No, fangs back at him, whether in warning or a taunt to get a reaction. He stared CK. Her mockery, as if she wasn't to fault for anything, so blatantly disregarding him at that second, but he saw it. An opportunity to step up, as his uncle had said. I have you to thank for this. Shikamaru returned the false grin back to her, flashing a darker narrow in his eyes. No longer stuck in his trance, but matching her harsh tone somewhat easily. Just the tiniest flinch of her cheek, as if no one ever dared to talk back to her like this before. Let that be a reminder. Her smile fell, amusement gone, and the threat made clear as day. Stay out of my way next time. Holding the last heat of her glare, she turned on her heels and moved past Matsuri, the eye stand quick to scramble to her side and into her office. Once the two disappeared behind the slammed door, the entire room took a breath and thanked themselves that Shikamaru had been her target. You weren't kidding about the cruel part. His eyes hadn't moved from the closed door, stuck to her golden name etched in the thick wood. She's a nightmare most of the time. Kiba cringed and went to fix his drawers. Better now that the rush was over. Competitive, harsh, doesn't care if she hurts your feelings, but she sells like no one else can. People want to use our firm because of her. It's why Mr. Yamanaka keeps her around. She's the best. Kiba shrugged, accepting the truth. This is going to be a drag, he sighed, releasing the last of that heat he had felt crawl up his back. Bet you're regretting those 2 extra years now. A joke helped clear the air. This is what I get for actually trying, Shikamaru muttered, checking his wristwatch. A gift from his old mentor, his lighter tucked in his back pocket. Guess we have time for you to show me that setup, before I have to go see that troublesome woman again. Yeah, Kiba sighed and unlocked the door to the office behind them. You get the old office Neji used before he got his promotion to department head of human resources. Quote, he still works here. He let surprise enter and just as easily stay as he glanced around the barren room. A desk set in the middle and the 2 bookshelves neatly dusted down for his arrival. The GL coffee table in the corner of the room and chairs to follow, nothing personal to give a warm feel. To the room. Yeah, a couple floors down. Kiba went about the shelves to search for a specific binder as he glanced back to explain. Miss Sabakuno made sure to get him out this year before the quarter ended, but he seems happier down there, so I guess it's a good thing. Quote, thought he had an interest in finances. He did. Kiba nudged his head down to Temari's office. Guy lasted 2 months before the mistress drove him out of here. I'm telling you, it was a constant battle between them as partners. Quote, you're really selling this new position of mine. If you're lucky she'll just ignore you. Kiba shrugged, setting the book on his desk while Shikamaru kept at the door. And some advice from your old buddy, don't argue with her, it's about as pointless as trying to bathe a cat. Glancing back once more to the closed door, seeing the glint of that golden name tag on its front, he took the analysis of his opponent and waited to make his move. Noted. Monday, 11:03 a.m. No. But, I said no, she growled louder at her brother over the phone. I do not want to speak to father, and you shouldn't be talking to him either after the last time he called and asked for money from us. Quote, he just wants. I said no, Konkuro. Threatening to lose her firm tone and chuck the phone out the full GL windows, Temari shut her eyes as he continued, once again stuck between hearing her brother out and crushing him. Mari, can you stop being stubborn for just a minute and just listen? Well, how about you remind him who took care of who after we left Suna? She leaned back in her chair, glaring at the skyline. I did not spend years fighting to keep you both away from him. I raised you and Gara on my own, working 3 jobs so you two could eat. Do I have to keep reminding you what life would be like if we stayed with that drunken sorry excuse of a father? You sound like a broken record. And like one, she repeated the speech. I will never forgive that man. Konkuro, bitter in her words and her start of the day mood, she continued on venomously, you would be better off remembering who got you out of that ed-up home. Quote, I know and you know we are grateful for you, sis, but, his muttered words met with a knock at her office door. She stared up, eyes wide, and quickly followed the turn of the doorknob by slamming the phone off and cutting off her brother's final attempt at convincing her once again to call back. Their father. She could not and she would not, swearing until the end of time that she would never talk to him again. The same night she grabbed her brothers by their hands and stormed out of that home, 16, bruised, beaten, and with only enough money in her pocket to get them as far away as he could. And to keep this foul mood going, he was here. Once again the idiot with the coffee stain entered her presence. Her worries were replaced, almost grateful that the anger from her talk still remained creased in her brows. What do you want? Sounding harsher than she needed to be, he stopped at the door and cautiously gauged the room. It's 11, Shikamaru's flat statement met with her quick glance down at her laptop screen and she smacked her red lips. It's 11:04. You're late, she scoffed, now set back into her role as the director of marketing. Punctuality is important, but I guess someone as inarticulate and inexperienced as you wouldn't know that. She gestured to the chair before her, calmly keeping her exterior stone cold, showing nothing from her previous conversation. Now sit so we can get the introductions over with. You already introduced yourself pretty memorably this morning. He stepped in, door shut behind him. You shouldn't have been standing in front of the elevator doors. Even his dragging steps fed into the heat, lazily glancing around the room, catching a peek out her GL windows, only looking back to her when he spoke. You should have watched where you were going, and a smart mouth to boot. His arrogant stroll to the chair in front of her desk. Are we going to have a problem, Nara? You don't have to be so formal, woman, he drawled on, going to sit. This is an office, not some grand throne room. Quote, office space or not, this department is run by me, and I have worked very hard to keep it running like a well-oiled machine. She glared at the stain to his button-up jacket, opened and displaying the mess with purpose, no matter what obstacles I have to deal with. Quote, I'm supposed to be your partner here. He leaned back in the chair and crossed his legs, almost too comfortable, not a lackey. I haven't decided yet if you even deserve the mention. She gave him another once-over and sneer to follow her strike. So far my judgment on you is nothing more than a lazy rich boy who got this position from his daddy all because he's buddy-buddy with my boss. She scoffed distastefully, nepotism at its finest. He didn't bother to acknowledge the obvious shot at him, and to me, you are not worth the effort, re. 80 to dismiss him, she sighed, I don't see this working out so you might as well give up now. If you say so, he shrugged, indifferent to her slow narrowed glare. Add no fight back to the list. Quote, and argue with a woman. He sucked his teeth, no thanks. East 2. Well, if you want to get into specifics, you did kinda strip down in the elevator. He sat up and gestured to himself, I should be the one filing for UAL Harmon here. Quote, pervert for looking, she scoffed at his audacity. You didn't see me stripping over the coffee spill, thrown off, frustrated so quickly, and clenching her fist on the desk. She almost didn't notice the subtle squint in his eyes, the little pull on the corner of his lips, forcing a reaction. Out of her. I had a tear in my stocking, she huffed, ready to defend, and rolled her eyes away as she realized, why was she arguing with a nobody like him? Why am I explaining myself to you? I'm your boss. Quote, partner. He corrected calmly. Temari almost jumped across the desk to smack him. Listen, she forced a breath, forced her hands to unclench, just enough not to toss the new coffee cup at her side in his face. Arrogance pissed her off, someone thinking themselves better than her, how dare he? Mr. Yamanaka wants you to learn from my department, because we are the best. I am the best. She would leave the little mention of how having him here could benefit her in the run for CEO, all she had to do was keep him around long enough to get what she wanted. She could do that, Temari could have him drowning in pointless paperwork just to appease her boss. Are you even aware of the position you've been gifted? Emphasizing her final word, intent on breaking that indifference on his face now. I didn't spend 6 years of my life in college for nothing, I know this business well enough, he shrugged back to her, unbroken. Fine. Just an obstacle, she told herself. You can shadow me this week, but do not get in my way. That means no questions, no stumbling, and no stupid looks. I don't hold hands and I do not slow down, so you better keep up with me or you will be left behind. He raised a brow back to her glare. As if unaffected by the warning. You will be a child, to be seen and not heard, got that? They kept the stare down going, she even thought herself victorious as he let out a sigh and stood. Is that all, Miss Sabakuno? The lazy drawl of her last name hit just right, grinding her teeth hard enough to make it personal. And one more thing, she called out to him, pausing his step at the door to look back at her, the mocking last strike made with a smirk, just flashing enough of the fangs to darken his glare. No. Coffee cups near me, Nara. He called it the moment she had stepped out of that elevator that morning. Troublesome. Monday, 9:19 p.m. Lacking. Temari repeated the words that had been haunting her all day, glaring at her third beer, the first having gone down faster than a shot, the S. Econ soon after. Now hidden away at her brother's simple apartment on the south side of Konoha, only getting his full attention with food and beer as an apology for hanging up and forgetting to call back after. Always one to hear her out, always one to push her just far enough, good or bad, their conversation earlier in the day set aside with one warning look when she came over after work. It had been the worst possible time for her brother to bring up the dreaded topic of their father again. A drunken man left alone, his children taken away by the eldest to a foreign land where she made a name for herself in order to protect them. She would do anything for them. Lacking or non-existent. Kankuro, further humored, threw his head back in another round of laughs, only dying down when she chucked the used plastic fork from their takeout back at him. Your boss really said that. He didn't just say it, he emphasized it. She groaned and dropped her head into her hands. He called me unapproachable too. She tensed when Kankuro snorted and laughed harder than before, glaring back at him, adding more to get it over with. He wants me to start being a team player and trust people, and he slowly returned, slowing the bellow into a throaty chuckle. You don't work well with others, sis, you're too competitive and controlling, he shrugged to her, grabbing his beer again. It's called being ambitious, Kankuro, he snorted at her, unlike you, I've got dreams bigger than your stupid garage. Quote, her brother's little run-down car garage, a lazy 3-minute walk from his apartment, and the first and only job he's ever wanted, making enough to move away for her and still complain that she was 15 minutes away. A man who liked to tinker and negotiate with the questionable people of Southside Konoha. You're just jealous I don't have to work all the time like you do. He stuck his tongue out, now seeking to annoy the hell out of her. She almost groaned when it began. Workaholics should be on your mental health chart along with anger management, daddy issues, your sociopathic tendencies, and stubbornness that reaches a level of insanity. She cut him off with one sharp curse. Maybe you should just try it out, try to be friendly. Quote, they both glanced at each other, before sharing a laugh across the coffee table, her brother still using the kitchen table for a pair of tires he brought home. She played the game well during work hours, not exactly friendly, but just enough held back to hook a customer and welcome them into her company's growing numbers. Known for sneaky strikes and harsh hits, clients left applauding at the end of her little show, Inochi's net worth adding more with each battle she took on. I am not a friendly person. Quote, this is true, he died down his laughter, throwing his hands on the back of the couch, swirling the beer in his right hand. The only person I've seen you be nice to, willingly, is Gara. He's my baby brother, she mocked with a dramatic hand to her chest, seeking now to annoy her other bro. There. Hello. The am I then? Kankuro rolled his eyes, swinging his beer back, his comment ignored as Temari continued her speech. The smartest, greatest, most adorable creation that came from Sunagaker, the first ever Sabakuno to become a lawyer, purposefully drawing a sweeter tone in her voice and making her middle brother groan with her doting words. He's 20, in college, and lives in his dorm, Mari, he scoffed, why do you still baby him? She wondered briefly if her youngest brother had gotten the care package she had packed him last week. He can be 100 years old and I'd still dote on him, you're just jealous it's not you. Both throwing mocking smiles at the other. Now go be a good middle brother. Kankuro rolled his eyes, and bring me something stronger than this piss you call alcohol. Quote, hitting the hard stuff on a Monday. Brave, Kankuro smirked as he stood, snatching their empty dinner containers while she wiped after them. You're in for a shit week, sis. Why can't I be tipsy at work? She sighed, joking, but some truth in the words, I'm fun tipsy. Quote, better than drunk you, Kankuro shouted from the kitchen. Although I do miss hearing you kick guys out of your bed at 3 a.m., it was quite a show for us to see growing up. When you pick up a guy from the bar, they should know in a one-night stand agreement there's no cuddling afterwards. Playing along, she smiled with him. Because your cold heart might freeze them if they try. Exactly. She chuckled and glanced briefly at the evening news behind her, the new TV still spotless and untouched with car oil, her brother's first big splurge. Besides, I haven't done that in a while, been too busy at work, she pouted to herself, resting her chin on her hand and sighing, I miss getting laid. You're right, sis, tipsy Temari is fun, you should keep her around, she scoffed, the buzz not helping her contain the day's worries for long. The back of her mind playing out the past of her father sat back with a GL, making her rethink ever taking another sip of alcohol again. And sober me is unapproachable, she realized with a sigh into the air, looking at Kankuro as he came back, and to top everything off, to make this day just an absolute worst, she practically shouted back to him, his brow furrowed at her frustration, at the reason why she had shown up to share her feelings, the only man that knew her better than she did sometimes, I now have to deal with a partner at work, in my department. He raised a brow, sitting cross-legged on the floor as she was, the table between them, and the half-empty bottle set in the middle as he questioned her. I'm gonna need more than that. I have to share my title, the one I worked so hard for, with some new guy, her glare darkened into the RO. Kankuro tensed, and not just some run-of-the-mill plain guy, but some entitled name-brand rich kid fresh out of college with zero experience on how to keep a job and the most arrogant look you've ever seen. Quote, you don't share, Kankuro simply stated, nodding along and hooked to the story. I don't share, she emphasized with him, waving her hand towards the poured shot he slid over. I mean, you should have seen this guy. He sat in front of me and looked me right in the eyes, she pointed to herself. Louder as she let loose her complaints, and gave 0s, Kankuro. Do I look like someone you can just brush off and not give a shit about? Slowly, he nodded with her, understanding, on course, almost helpful, almost. Almost. Is he cute? And she lost him, her anger fell into nothing. Please don't do this again, she groaned and threw her head forward into her hands. Just fire him, like she hadn't thought of that one the moment he flashed that wise smirk back to her. She groaned again and laid her head into her folded arms on the coffee table. Can't. He's Inochi's, not by blood, nephew. I need him if I want that promotion, she mumbled into her arms and peeked up at him for a solution. They stayed in silence for a moment and Kankuro finally sighed loudly, failing to help as he lifted his drink just as she did hers. Man, Mondays are the worst. The worst. They cheered to their misfortune and took the shot together, the week ahead troublesome as that stupid kid would saw. Why? The week of shadowing her had been interesting to say the least. Rumors always did hold some truth and her reputation followed each click of those heels she wore. The woman was unbreakable, her face set in stone, and those around her making way without hesitation. When addressing anyone he noticed how her sights never left, focused on each word and critically analyzing each face in search of a lie. When finished she went one of two ways, a calm stern approval, no praise, or a blunt accusation of mistake. She did not hold back in her response, she did not ch or fluster, she confidently controlled every moment. Either way he did grimace once when she lowered her voice at a pair of actual interns who had brought her the wrong papers. He was sure that look she made would haunt their nightmares for the rest of their lives, and possibly his. She was, as they said, terrifying at times. On a business standpoint he could admire the way she led, lacking the soft hand, but gaining results. She was strategic in her approach, very detail-oriented and never letting a single mistake slip past her. As they had praised, she was the best. Attracting all sorts of attention, all types of clients, the stack of files doubling by the end of the day, her team staring back at it with a sense of dread. Shikamaru would hear it at times, a slip of some foreign word he didn't quite understand, her tone drive. Opting to make the rough sound. A curious observation when she spoke to her stand mostly, the short young woman trailing after her like a puppy every time she left the office, tablet in hand and nodding from start to finish. Outside of the mistress, the girl was all quiet smiles and subtle glances at the team. He found it odd, but didn't ask her. No, instead he went down to human resources and met up with Neji Hyuga. An old friend as wealthy as his family, though not as close considering the drama their clans had committed to one another long ago. The only true answer he had gotten: the woman was not a native, she was from Suna, a foreigner in the country, an immigrant, but definitely making this place her home. Ruling that department as if it was her own kingdom. He would have asked, but she had said no questions, and like a shadow all he did was follow at her back, silently making his notes throughout the week. Monday he had been hidden away in his office, stacks and stacks of useless guidelines to be memorized and taken to heart. She had quite literally dropped a 10-pound binder in his arms and told him not to bother her until he had finished it. He dozed off for a few minutes after the first chapter, only waking when Kiba came back holding more papers and a wink with a fresh coffee. He knew the business as a whole, he grew up around these people, but those tedious little details now seemed like a mountain in his path. A drag, but needed. Tuesday he actually got to step after her, in a clean suit this time, following those loud heels to a meeting she had with a client about final touches to their ad. He got to wait outside for the half hour she spent in there with them. Catching the victory smile she wore as she turned away from the customers, and upon seeing him, it fell faster than the binder had. Concluding to himself, she still hated him. Wednesday he didn't see her for a couple hours, off to lunch her stand had said. Wherever she went she had came back quieter, on the verge of being distracted, only returning to her tundra look when someone had pitched a sloppy idea of using puppets for an ad. Thursday started with that binder again, flipping the last page after taking the damn book home every night to read through it all. On that second to last page a purple sticky note that said he could ask one question. He realized he had an opening to the big leagues with this little mistake she left him. Then he understood the military reference. Temari stood outside her office, team at attention as she simply called out and handed files to each person, pausing at Sakura and handing her the remaining 4 in her hands with a stern command to have them done by tomorrow. She returned the next day and was handed all the files back, each one done and to be approved by her, her door shut and the team blowing out a breath in relief that they had managed her deadline. Demanding, he noted. Outside of business she did not talk to him or anyone else. Her stand got her attention most of the time, but nothing past a change or check-in schedule. She was professional as it got, walls built to hide anything past that cold hard exterior his partner had and nothing or showing past those sharp eyes. A cruel mistress she was. Friday came as no surprise. He spent the morning waiting outside the same rooms as she made a pitch to a Korean company that wanted to promote their line of spiced drinks. She left the room with a roar, their company prospering from time she gave to those men. Shikamaru only wished he'd been in there to see it for himself. The smirk she carried followed her to the elevators, careful to keep at least a foot of distance between them as they stood facing the doors of the elevator. No coffee in sight. One question, he hummed to the buzz of the elevator, catching her attention now that he bothered to actually speak to her, having been just as quiet as she was that week. You actually finished the reading. She looked at him this time. He nodded once, just the shortest raise in her brow as if surprised he had managed such a task. Looking back to the doors, Temari sighed. Fine, what is your question? I think I'm going to save it for another time. He kept his gaze on those lit elevator buttons, aware that she was staring at him fully, even opening her mouth to speak, but saying nothing as the elevator stopped and the click of those heels led, a subtle dark gaze following that sway again. And one more observation he noticed, one he kept tucked away in the back of his mind: the woman never wore pants. Her modesty only reached the top of her knees, Those tanned legs taunting him, natural, not airbrushed. He wouldn't even begin to mention other angles he'd seen, he would say by accident, but he'd be lying to himself. If he wanted to be superficial, she was definitely an attractive woman. Outside of obvious ETS, the sharp lines that drew on her face held subtle delicate curves that sparked a second look, and whatever makeup she used never seemed like too much. The only harsh addition that read on her lips, drawn on like a painting, not a smear in sight. Hair always tied back and bangs always brushing neatly across her forehead, as they say, not a hair out of place. Those eyes seemed to change with every turn though, on one side it would be blue, on another green, shifting between the shades to create its own unique blend. A crease in her brow making them darker, a look of indifference dulling them, but always so intense with some hidden emotion he couldn't quite pinpoint. Those eyes, like some kind of impossible puzzle that would drive him to the brink of insanity before he figured it out. Rewinding the week in his head made his thoughts feel heavy, the workload, the woman, the troubles of his previous life catching up with him as he shut his eyes to still the thoughts for a brief moment. So how's your first week been, Shikamaru? With a sigh, his eyes opened and he leaned further back in the velvet chair in his uncle's office, softly glaring back at the dim electric fireplace as the fire crackled. The day outside falling into a simmering darkness, the last light fighting to stay alive as night approached. A lot, he muttered, lifting a hand to grab the offered drink from Inochi's hand. Expensive imported scotch, makes 6 years of college feel like nothing. Inochi laughed lightly, the aged lines on his face shining with the dull glow as he took his spot to the other side of the pristine oak coffee table. Sharing a drink with his nephew at the end of the first week. And how is it working with Miss Sabakuno? The question would have stumped him. He wasn't exactly sure if he should mention anything, instead pointing to one big factor he noticed on the first day he had arrived in that awkward meeting with the department heads, what all their potential could get them. A promotion. You're considering her for Tsunade's position, a statement met with Inochi's raised brow, surprised that he had figured it out. Well, from what I have observed so far, she's definitely one of your best. Quote, do you think she'd make a good fit? His simple question met with two paths to take, one that would cross a line he wasn't ready for. I'm not really in the position to tell you that, Uncle Inochi, hesitating for only a second before holding firm on his own side, earning his way to that top chair, fairly, not letting his entitlement pick for him again. I hope you understand that I won't be giving you any insight on your teams, that's not what I came here to do. A short pause, a slow smile, his uncle almost seemed pleased with the response. I understand, Inochi chuckled, dimming down as he sipped at his drink, his nephew mimicking the gesture. I know how difficult it is starting something new, and I did in a way throw you into the deep end by pairing you up with my best. Leaning back into his armchair, Inochi let out a deep sigh, growing serious. Temari she just takes some time getting used to. She's a little rough around the edges sometimes. He paused and tapped the side of his GL with a finger, searching, a slow smile following, but that woman probable. Why has a heart bigger than any other person I've ever met in this industry? That's why I hired her. She shares our company's vision. Making a difference, it's what we are all about. I sense a story. Shikamaru raised a brow, unconsciously sitting up, and felt disappointed in his curiosity when Ino Kai shook his head. Unfortunately, it's not my story to tell, Shikamaru, those details are between me and her. He shrugged, ready to take a sip, but pausing just at his lips, a wink following, but if she was to share them with you, then maybe you'll understand. Quote, you set us up as partners, knowing how difficult that woman was, and now you add in a puzzle, to what? Shikamaru scoffed, realizing the challenge his uncle was dangling in front of him. Motivate me. Quote, your father said it would work. Inochi boosted a laugh when Shikamaru groaned. You two need to stop your bi-weekly get-togethers, it's become a drag for me, you know. He hoped he heard the subtle threat of the two men driving his future again, but his further humor didn't help much. I hope to see you at your father's lake house next weekend. To that, he drank, taking a longer sip than usual, knowing that the topic would eventually come up. He hadn't been avoiding them, not really, only short calls of progress and short appearances made with Ino or Choji during the past year. I'll try to be there. He lacked the promise as he sipped again. Don't forget your girlfriend this time. Now his eyes rolled for a different reason. His girlfriend, a quiet heiress named Shiho that he kept tucked away from his mother's prying eyes and his father's curious questions. The few times they had met after the start of his master's degree had grown an impatience in his mother, wanting her son to do more, to do better, to do too much it seemed. Even he could feel the days grow longer as they made their comments, mainly his mother, all about his future. Everyone always put a foot in his steps, making him go where they wanted him to go. Expecting more from him each day. Might have to if my mom keeps pestering me to propose to her. He glanced once at the drink, then the fire, slowly sighing, I still think I'm too young to settle down, it's ONL. Why been a year? Well, your mom can be rather involved. Inochi winced at the memory, though I do suppose Yoshino does keep our family in check. He chuckled as he downed the rest of his drink, leaning forward to put it on the table. Hell, I was even younger than you are when your aunt and I tied the knot, but those were different times I suppose. And now you sound just like my old man, Shikamaru sighed as the story began. Chozo was even worse. Inochi boosted a sharp laugh, as if in disbelief as he said it. He tried nay dumpling your aunt made and dropped to both knees to propose right then and there. We hear that story every time we get together. He chuckled, downing his own drink and leaving it at the edge of the table. It's probably why Choji is engaged to his sous chef. With a shrug he stood. They make beautiful chemistry on a plate. Inochi sighed dreamily, leaning back and resting on his hand. I'll have to stop by their restaurant this weekend with the missus, now that you've mentioned it. Quote, tell Auntie I said hi. Shikamaru nodded to him as he paid. Have a good night, son. Waving back he shut the door behind him and let out a breath, slipping his hands into his pockets and gripping the lighter in his right. Done for the day and with no other tasks to do, he strolled from the oak doors to the elevator. Stepping in and glancing at the numbers. Well, he did have one more troublesome thing to check up on. It came to no surprise that after finally finishing that last page from those damned guidelines and rules, that he had his opening to do this right. To know this job better than anyone else, not to sell dreams, but to inspire new ones as his father would say. Going towards his room, his steps slowed in the barren office space, lights dimmed and night pouring in from the GL, the only source show. Ing the way was her opened office door. She was still here. His uncle promised more with his vague description of the woman. Now all he had to do was figure out what her real intentions were, possibly a little selfish that he wanted to know so bad, but he threw back that guilt along with those subtle glances when he walked behind her. Remembering the opening to the chessboard she had made. Her mistake was allowing him one question and he'd be a fool to pee up the opportunity. A subtle turn after he shut his office door quietly and he stepped towards her office, wishing to brush the prick off his shoulder, but it stuck to him, not fearful, but brimming with anticipation to what the future would hold, along with the folder hidden at his side, his secret weapon to another mistake she had made. All he needed was one step and the light of her office washed over him as he looked inside. Sure enough, she was there, eyes moving from a paper to her laptop, typing, writing with a harsh red pen, finding mistakes and destroying them with a brisk swipe of her hand. His first move made with a deep sigh. Honestly, woman, do you ever stop? That cold gaze turned up to him, lacking surprise in his appearance and already losing her interest. One question, her voice boomed in the silence, rough as Inochi had said, and you choose to ask me this? Quote, call it curiosity. He casually leaned against the doorframe, only allowing a step into the room. True to his intent, you've been the first and last person to go in and out of this building for the past week. Quote, it's called ambition, probably something you've never heard about, instantly responding as if expecting it, sharp-tongued and seeking to strike before he could. He felt his lip twitch, wanting to grin, but holding back as she leaned back in her chair. He couldn't see it, but he could hear just the faint bounce of her crossed legs under the desk. And why would you know that anyways? You are the last person to come in and the first to leave. Perks of my uncle being the boss, he snarked back, joking, but just enough to catch an annoyed eye roll he found amusing, and people in this off ice like to gossip, especially about you. The words you're looking for are nepotism and I could care less what people think about me. Looking back down, she sighed, her focus returned to her work. As long as I'm doing what I need to do, there's no point in caring whose toes I step on. Quote, you're a workaholic. He pushed off the doorway and found the air light enough to enter her forbidden office for the first time since their introduction. And you, a lazy, she fired back, her eyes remaining down on whatever she was checking, streaks of red pen scribbled all over the page. I still got my work done by 6, he slowed his pace, hand twitching in his pocket as he got a closer look to the domain she called hers. That Suna mention made true when he noticed 3 perfectly lined cacti at the edge of her desk, the only pop of color in the room. The one in the middle threatening to reveal the color of its flower in the next few weeks. Based on his geography lessons as a kid, Suna was a city made in a barren wasteland, useful for its alternative wind power plants and housing some pretty gruff people from his knowledge about Southside Konoha. The corner where all foreigners ended up. That little fact made true when she talked back. Unlike you, I've got more to do and I believe in quality over quantity, same as Inochi does, her quick lash made with a huff. What's the point of doing something if you're not going to do it right anyways? Quote, perfectionist, he remarked, finally met with her gaze turning to see him, closer. Her narrowed eyes briefly on his and then dead set on the crooked tie loosened around his neck. Better than a slob like you, unimpressed by his dragging steps. I'm done for the day, and ties are troublesome. To emphasize his point, he gripped the end of that suffocating tie and worked a moment to loosen it further. He didn't exactly hate suits, but he didn't like the way the tie had been quietly choking him all week. As if it threatened to hang him if he allowed a single mistake to be made, whether in her presence or the company's name. Her presence currently did make the knot fight back his hand, daggers watching the struggle for only long enough to be noticed. Why are you here anyways? She forced her gaze down, attempting to find the place she had been at earlier. It's 8, shouldn't you have already left? I was helping out with the Kiri budgets due on Tuesday, he shrugged, casually mentioning his own self-ignored task. It's why I stayed late. Quote, those are already done. She waved him off, half listening, not catching the same mistakes she had made to the edits he had done. Seeing the stolen file from Tuyuya's department on the front desk earlier in the day, he took the liberty of taking a peek, a second set of eyes as partners should do. Oh, well, he drew out with a knowing tone, lifting the folder up. Whoever did them apparently got their math wrong and it needed to be redone or else the production team won't have the right estimate for it. He slid the folder over to her, slipping his hand back in his pocket and raising a brow, expecting her to look at it. And she did, glaring at the title before her for a short while, just long enough that when she snapped her eyes up at him he forced himself to swallow quietly, to not show that tea. He look almost made him flinch. I did these on Wednesday, she muttered, teeth grinding with the realization when she snatched the folder and skimmed the revised blue marks. Quote. A mumbled foreign word he raised a brow at, given no explanation to what it meant. I think the term you're looking for is thank you. She didn't bother to look at him as she continued to look through his edits. I don't praise, an irritated mutter met with a half-hearted scoff. Guess everyone was right, he sighed, glancing out the dark window into the nightlife outside. You are a cruel mistress. That one pissed her off, her search having stopped a while ago as she slowly peeked up, his sights still set out the window. I wouldn't be where I am if I sat around saying sorry to everyone who got in my way. Her threat ignored. The view from the top won't look so nice if you do that. Rolling his eyes back to her, he took the heat of her glare and attempted to smother it with his calm sigh, offering reason to CA. Her, the report isn't due until Tuesday before the pitch anyways. Why don't you just call it a night, look at it with fresh eyes, a suggestion to help further, see how far he could sway her his way. It's Friday. Quote, I don't want to leave more work for myself. Her plain statement met with a wall built in front of herself. No, he wouldn't pester, he was still convinced she didn't like him much. Suit yourself, Temari. Quote, Miss Sabakuno, he didn't even get the chance to head for the door when she snapped, eyes harder than before, his own narrowing back. We are not on first name basis, Nara. We should be if we're partners. Quote, partners contribute to one another and so far you've only aided in giving me a headache. She leaned forward on her folded arms, his eyes accidentally dropped just for a second on the opening in her white blouse. So get out of my office before I make you leave. One sharp grin later and he blew out a sigh as he left, muttering under his breath. Troublesome. Rough, his uncle had said. Troublesome? What the hell was that idiot talking about? All week trailing behind her like a lost puppy, but with such a disinterested look glazed over his eyes. She hadn't bothered to snap at him. Entitled rich kid, that's all he was. Too much needed to be done before she would allow herself even the thought of relaxing and turning her fueling fires in his direction. An obstacle who she could put away with random work, like a child given crayons to entertain himself with while the adults talked. Meetings and pitches were her place. She did them alone, confidently, and without anyone's help. Without a partner to share that spotlight with. Her department aside, she put a face to her company, and a name they couldn't forget. Her team suffered only when they slacked, some barely living up to her high expectations and others making mistakes in their fright. Rarely did she let it slide with just a stern look, but the past couple of weeks had been harsh even for her. Too busy to have time to dread the task she had put on her plate, one that Inochi had tasked her to complete all on her own, one that would benefit everyone who knew the name Yamanaka Market. Ing Industries. Inochi believed she could bridge the gap between old rivals, and she would figure out just how to do it. Then here comes her nuisance with a report she had done and telling her she had messed up. How dare he? How dare he be right and she wrong? The longer she glared at the revisions, the more blue she saw, the more she felt the disappointment inside. Too much on her plate to take the aid he offered and see it as something good, too much for everything that had happened during the shit week. Her brother had predicted. Her father had called twice. She hadn't bothered to answer it, but it ate away at her perfect facade like a festering wound. Wednesday had been agonizing to pull through. The only positive of the day was the phone call at the night with Gara. Everything else paled in comparison when he brightened their day with tales of his brutal college life. Temari joked about her own experience being nothing but Cleese, and their middle brother said he only crashed the campus for its wild parties in his early 20s. Her past aside, she needed to look into the future. She needed to focus on next week's endeavors and the one promising member in her team she found bearable. Sakura seemed to just barely grasp Temari's way of testing her each week. More work, more involvement in multiple projects, more harsher KS than the other. Yet that woman kept coming back for more, secretly surprising her boss and confirming her thoughts since last quarter's beginnings. Temari needed more aid, more leadership, and her partner wasn't exactly her first pick, but Sakura was starting to become her favorite lackey if he wanted to be friendly, promising and ready for what Temari would offer her soon enough. The question she had left to test her new partner was a simple test he had almost paid, until his little trick of outshining her, of showing her how she made a mistake, taking no amusement in it himself. How did he get the report and why did he help her? It was nearly 9 when she finally decided the rest of the revisions would need a fresh mind to look at them. Leaving them on her desk before standing up and heading for that dreaded elevator, alone now she leaned against the back of it, counting the mind-numbing dings until they dropped her to the first floor. The loud echo of her departure seen by the front desk and security guards, looking after her as they did every night until she stepped out into the stuffy air of the bottom floor. Almost a relief to be out of the 4 walls of that menacing office. She could go as far as saying that it was a love-hate relationship in there, admitting now that maybe she did have too much to do. That however lasted as long as the night air brushed her bangs against her skin, the subtle smell of a cigarette catching her attention. About time, the sound of his voice slowed her steps, forcing a pause in her departure and looking at him as he made his way to her. Shikamaru waiting for her, but why? What are you doing out here? Can't really say waiting for you, he began hesitantly, a nervous rubbing the back of his neck. Sounds like I'm stalking you, he added quicker and with a flick of the cigarette to the sidewalk, abandoning the last drag to Defa. ND himself, which I'm not. Nara. Her eyes narrowed, a warning, one he didn't seem to understand. He began, slower in explaining, working on her thin nerves. Out with it. It's almost 9. And she knew where this was going. And it's dark. He tried one final time, her fist clenched. The street lamps work just fine, unfortunately he didn't take the hint. What I mean is, he let the rest spill out. She bit her tongue once more, I didn't think you should walk to your CA. Alone at such a late hour. And the shit week caught up, full force and blinding her to all the restraint she put on herself in that building. I didn't ask what you thought. Not now, and certainly not since you got here. The venom took over, and her anger peaked, and let me guess, she flashed a dangerous grin, one that seemed to confuse him. You thought you'd be some chivalrous man who helped a poor defenseless woman to her car so she didn't get mugged. She faked a gasp, or worse. Quote, well, I mean, she didn't even give him the chance. Let's get two things clear here. Nara, a click of those heels. One, I don't need a man to protect me. I can handle that on my own. And two, her steps got closer to him, the click louder as her voice rose past venomous, edging with pure hat. Red, that man can't possibly be an unmotivated, entitled, snarky, little rich boy who got his position because he was born into it. So I'll say this once and only once, unless you have something work-related to talk to me about, don't talk to me at all. Quote, she had bit his head clear off his shoulders. Turning away before she could see the full effect the wrath had brought, she moved down that sidewalk as if every step threatened to suck her into the concrete below. Impulse, she would blame it on later when she looked back, he was gone. Good riddance, she huffed to herself. Who did he think he was? Asking to help her. Help her. No one had ever offered to tag along, her brothers aside. No man had ever taken her to her car, or made sure she got someplace soft. She never allowed them to offer. How dare he think she couldn't do such a simple task as walking to her car, alone, at night, in a city that never slept. Alone. This feeling, she hated it, she knew it all too well. Gripping inside and making it harder to breathe, forcing a bitter taste in her mouth that almost made her turn around and take it back. She was a professional in stomping on this feeling, making it harder each time to admit it. She felt it, the feeling of guilt, and no amount of pushing could get it to stay down. Glaring from the street below to the sky above before realizing she had made a mistake. Not even remembering the walk to her car, barely remembering the slam of that door, holding that damn wheel as if it was the only thing to keep her grounded. She let it finally fuel her to make that call. Hello, why do you keep calling Konkoro? She swallowed, her shoulders refusing to settle the aching feeling as they wouldn't relax, just the sound of Ross's voice curling her spine. We both told you we wouldn't help you anymore and yet you keep pestering us to send you money. Temari. Why? She demanded, fearing her voice would grow weaker if she allowed him a moment to control the conversation she had played out a million different ways in her head. Temari. Her name spoken so gently, she hated it. I have been struggling to reach out to you and your brothers for a while now. I know what I did was bad, and bad. She blew a short breath, smiling into the dark car. You think, for the last 11 years what you did was bad? Quote, sweetie, I've been trying to get better. Don't sweetie me, you son of a bitch. What you did was unforgivable. Just managing, her throat thickening as she spat back, getting drunk every single day, gambling all our money away, using drugs around the boys, and beating me was one thing, but when you raised that hand to Gara, a child, the baby of our family, and hurt him, you're lucky you lived that night, you sorry excuse of life. Even she feared herself at that moment. I never meant to. She cut off the final attempt, managing, just barely, a level under shouting. Don't call any of us ever again, this is my final warning, father. Spat through her teeth, rough, she hoped the poisoned threat would reach him all the way to Suna. When she hung up the phone, trying twice to see the red button through the water, the creak of the leather on her seat moved as she leaned back. A deep breath released and she drowned in her mistake. Raising a hand to her face, knowing the black mascara would smudge as she smeared it off her cheek as best as she could. Imperfections would not do, but right now she was alone and no one could see the cracks. Yet all she could feel now was the guilt. Monday, 8:38 a.m. He hadn't been there when she first arrived, his eyes stant dropping his phone when her heels made way in her domain. People hard at work, no one daring to look at her, something suddenly bothering her when all those eyes avoided her. Monday could not come any faster, the weekend spent mostly on schedule as if nothing happened, as if the events of that night had never transpired, whether it was the past or the future that put her into that corner to spit fire and ash out of habit. Every word clung to her, hooked into her back, but she hid it, taking out the frustration on the search. Going over the schedule for the day, she absently sneered at the mention of the Kirin deal that would be held tomorrow. The revisions would need to be done, that was if she could find the damn report. She had left it on her desk, right? That's the whole day. Matsuri glanced up from the tablet in her arms, speaking Sunian, raising a brow as she slid over the white bakery bag from the edge of the desk closer when she noticed Temari still engrossed in the search for the report he had left her on Friday. My mother made the twisted bread with the chocolate again, said you should have a fresh batch for the start of the week, since you didn't stop by this weekend, like you usually do. Quote. She looked and looked, pausing only when it got too quiet, remembering now she was in company and needed to slip into those frigid heels again. A little reminder of why she did this, of who she did this job for people who had started out just like herself. Thank you, Matsuri. She set her search aside to look at her eye stand, a softer grin and nodding once, taking just a second to look at the little bag on her desk. A bakery logo written in Sunian, Nanuko's Fresh Bakery, colored in red and gold on the side, a family business she knew very well, one she helped create. And thank your mother as well. Matsuri grinned back, hers easier than her boss's one. Yes, Miss Sabakuno, she nodded her head and headed for the closed door, glancing back once before leaving her to continue her futile search as soon as the door shut. Temari knew she had left it right there, in the first drawer right on top to be looked at first thing this morning. Right. It wasn't like a folder could grow legs and walk off. She had a meeting in 14 minutes, the time on her thin gold watch ticked away, her mother's last earthly possession. Kept hidden from her father so he wouldn't have sold it back then. Using what time she had, she did what she knew best, multitasking. The sweet twisted bread made by hand did more than just fix her mood, it made her day as bright as the chocolate tasted. As if Matsuri knew it would help her pee this troubling time. Though she did still look through each file cabinet as she finished off the treat. And like a clock she was out and leading again. His office door shut and his eye stand kept busy after hiding behind a folder when she appeared. After the morning HLE she had tried looking for the folder again, this time taking out her frustration in not finding it by returning to the daily tasks of keeping to the strict schedule. His door once again shut and this time Inuzuka hadn't been at that desk. Everything on a set course inside the four walls around her, everything except the unexpected knock on her door. She would have guessed Matsuri, but the door didn't open at the first knock. Her fingers stopped, brow raised as a second knock came, not her eye stand for sure now. Come in, calling out, subtly looking from the laptop to the door, she fought between a groan and a sigh of relief that he had finally made his appearance. Shikamaru glanced once in her direction, dropped his gaze and walked closer, a folder in hand and now avoiding her eyes on him. Any other time it wouldn't bother her, but she had been drowning in this feeling for longer than needed. As that, she began her question when he nodded, finishing for her. The finished Kiri budget report, he muttered as he set them down on her desk and turned to leave, eyes downcast and avoid. Ding hers, you left it behind. Reminded of how she had snapped at him Friday, the guilt crawled up her back again, it had been leering at her all weekend no matter how much she tried to ignore it. As her brother would say, it was time to put her big girl pants on and apologize. He had done them over the weekend, he had fixed her mistake and saved her from blame, from embering punishment for her miscalculation. Once again she took on more than was asked of her, accepting more from herself, but this time it had backfired and her savior had been the kid she'd been hiding away from, or had she possibly been sneaking glances all morning to see if he would come out of that office. Team player Inochi had said and she couldn't disappoint him. Nara, she called out, attempting to not shout as she had before, keeping calmer now, he stopped, a sigh, and turned around to face her. Close the door, she gave him a second to question the command, another sigh, before he listened and shut the door to her office. One thing she never did was apologize, but here she went. As soon as he looked back to her, it came out. Like a bandage she ripped it off, standing behind her desk, only a second to feel the unease before speaking, meaning each word. I want to apologize for the things I said on Friday, I've been stressed and you didn't deserve me snapping at you for it. She couldn't quite help it when she glanced away, the admission harder than she wanted it to be. I am sorry. His face set in stone during the speech, unflinching and simply watching her say each word. A part believed he would reject it, and when he hummed and nodded to her, she couldn't help but tense, awaiting the final verdict. Already forgotten, he muttered, eyes now turned away from her and slipping his hands in his pockets, can I leave? She wanted to shove him out the door, to make her apology go with him. Admitting weakness was like a recoil that slapped her in the face. She sighed. No, grabbing the budget report in her hands, straightening the pages neatly as she spoke, returning to her seat. I need you to show me how I am. Ate a mistake in them, so I don't do it again. Can't you just read it on your own? He took a step into the room, closer to her and away from the door when she sat. What do you think teams are for? She raised a brow and leaned against her hand, gaining the upper hand. We share the workload, and I only distribute the work when I see that it is needed. Everyone here plays a part and I run them like a. She stretched out the last letter and offered a smile back at him when he caught on an SCO. FFED. Well-oiled machine. Precisely. A short shot just to brighten her mood even more. I didn't know you could use that brain for something other than being a smart. He grinned, keeping his eyes far from her now. She for some reason couldn't tell if it was a good or a bad thing, suddenly unreadable to her. Your job is to make sure I don't waste my time on pointless details, so I can do my actual job and make sure this pitch is ready by tomorrow. Quote, you mean prevent you from making the same mistakes like you did the first time? Despite the remark, she brushed it off with her final strike, well, just enough not to sound as rough as she had been on Friday. What was her goal? Her purpose? That CEO title, and he was just the ticket she needed to get to the top. Inochi wanted more from her and she would do it, even if more was her cracking just a shred of that ice barrier to be nice. Well, nice enough to him at least, she could manage that. You know, she dropped her tone just a bit, he glanced at her when she did. I was going to get Haruno to do it, but you just bought yourself a front row seat to be my personal eye stand on the matter, partner. She rose from her chair, a sharp grin following. The way she closed any deal she knew would be in her favor. That means my time is now your time. If you want to work with me, you have to work like I do. Quote. His face fell, a flash of irritation at her command. You're kidding, right? Carrying that threat with her as she walked carefully around her desk, each heel clicked with purpose. Moral of the story: don't get smart around me because I don't mind torturing the new guy for fun, she scoffed. Dropping her gaze and back up, might even build a backbone on you in the process. She smirked, his eyes trained to her lips, the raise in his shoulders as he tensed at the seemingly innocent gesture. So she needed something to hook him with, and what better thing than the truth, the reason for her harsh words and cold exterior. Inochi said I needed to start being a. She paused just enough to make herself uncomfortable. Team player in order to get the promotion I want. So where better to start than the new guy who just so happens to be his, not by blood, nephew. Glancing back at the front page of the report, his blue-marked corrections caught her eye, a reminder that he saw more than she did, that he strategized as Inochi had said. She looked back at him, eyes locked in a soft glare with the admission, at least you have half a brain in that head of yours. And it might come in handy with these quarter goals. I don't have a choice, do I? You can try and change my mind, but I'm known as Inochi's secret weapon, reserved for only our toughest clients, and when I want something, Shikamaru, something in his face fell, eyes hard, darker even when she said his name, but his focus set solely on her as she leaned back against her desk, hands in her lap and crossing her ankles below. I get it any way I can. Her chin rose with a wide grin to accompany her casual admission, plus I enjoy winning. Quote, should have never said anything, he mumbled under his breath, eyes moving off her and glaring at the ground, rubbing the back of his neck as if he was stumped on a move. It would have saved you a lot of grief, she agreed, turning back to grab the files, but you're stuck with me, so run Al. Ong and get these finalized by 2 before my meeting. She won and came out on top, never letting anyone even try to be a step ahead of her, but why did she suddenly feel uneasy? His glare at the floor had long shifted, something that sounded like a chuckle rising as he lifted his eyes to meet H. The unexpected smile made hers fall faster than ever before. Like some hidden card, he played an unexpected new obstacle in her path. On one condition. Excuse me. You come have lunch with me. Quote. Now she let the surprise break the seams of control on her face, staring back at him as if he'd grown a second head. Since when did he get this? Why? Like he knew something she didn't, like he thought himself better than her. That's not happening, she scoffed, gripping the folder harder in her hand. Luncher, I don't do it. He stood his ground against her, keeping indifferent and suddenly growing a few inches taller than her from his previous disgruntled slouch. She could even go as far as saying he almost intimidated her. Almost. Why, as you said before, you're the best here, so convince me to want to help you, pitch me like you would a client over lunch. He smirked and leaned forward, just an inch, but she swore it was closer. I'm not an idiot. I know you've been keeping me locked to this floor with those stupid guidelines all of last week. You've been wasting my time and I don't appreciate that much. Quote. I'm your boss, she defended herself, scoffing and lifting her chin defiantly at him, pushing off the desk to stand straighter, to be intimidating herself. You can't make demands. Partners and watch me. A firm reminder, and she pressed her lips together, keeping a curse from escaping. This is what she got for trying to be friendly, but she relaxed, just enough to hear him out. Willing the guilt to shut off and just shove him out the room, but it was stuck like glue and he stubbornly wasn't letting go of it either. I've been playing nice with you so far. I didn't want to step on your toes for the past week while I was familiarizing myself with everything, but you kinda left me no choice now. But you already. She paused when he raised a finger at her. She would have snapped it in two if he was closer. I said I forgot. I never said I forgave you for Friday. He shrugged a shoulder, hands slipped comfortably in his pockets and offering her no way out of it. You want that promotion? I'll help you get it, fair and square. Quote. Why would you help me? Shikamaru took a breath, as if considering his answer carefully, taking his time, taking hers before answering. The entire time she waited, she held her breath. You clearly care for the company and we value that type of dedication. As they say, you make a difference. Here, though your approach seems to lack something. He had to mentally swallow at the darkened look she gave. He was half convinced she would hit him. I don't like wasting my time and effort on things that are too troublesome, because I can just as easily use my entitlement to go to a different director. He shook his head, almost bitter in his words. She noticed it and listened closer. But I don't want to do that. I want to learn from the best, and that's you, but you have to let me in. You have to let me be your partner for real. Quote. This kid played her move back to her, almost as perfectly as she had. Compliment aside, he saw her worth, he saw her potential, like Inochi had. Impressed was not the word she wanted to use, but it did make the pride in her dim down, just enough to consider. Maybe she could be a bit more friendly, as her brother suggested. Screw the guilt. This was more tortuous than any feeling. This was a challenge. Temari did like those. Fine. She let the forced red smile spread, fangs hidden behind. For now, lunch at noon, Nara. He nodded and stepped forward, palm out as she slapped the report in it and held his smirk with her glare. The subtle wave of cigarette smoke tickled her nose when he neared, instantly making her crave one. Then just a short pause, a little fight back, so she didn't fold completely in front of him. Don't be late. See you then, Temari. Turning away from her, he made his way to the door. Hole, she spat under her breath, unapologetically glowering harder when he glanced back at her with a smirk. Heard that. She made sure the finger she threw up at him happened after the door closed. When she stood before him pouring out that anger, he had been in a state of frozen that put ice to shame. Through the shock feeling, each word hurt, leaving a harsh reminder that he had made his own mistake by underestimating his opponent. No, not opponent, his partner. She hadn't slapped him, but it sure felt like it. The one thing he still couldn't get out of his memory was the wells threatening to break, still trying to decide if she had tears behind those sharp glaring eyes or had he been imaging the whole thing. Rough, his uncle had said, with such a tempting secret hidden inside. Noon, she had said, and he hadn't been late. He could spot a few familiar faces in the sparse crowd of the restaurant, mainly businessmen his father had met throughout the years, more faces known after his uncle brought his WN friend group into the mix. Once again choosing his steps for him, but if he was going to do something he might as well do it right. He only picked the place because he knew the chef. One of Choji's dreams made a reality, this one just happened to be closer to the office than the little spot he had started at a couple years back. Making his way quickly to the top position and daring the public to try his creative take on simple foods made exquisite through the means of fine dining. In all honesty, he hated the stuffy feel of the place, as if the pressure of the office followed him, he actually did, carrying a hard look of annoyance all the way here. Temari wasn't exactly showing discomfort, but he could tell she kept a certain tense in her shoulders, as if she brought that cold exterior outside of the office with her as well, that controlled composure needed for those 4W. All's now set in a place like this. Both afraid to make a mistake that would show their hand. Today's ensemble, another skirt, a burnt red hue to its form-fitting leather, made for her waist and finishing just at her knees. A simple white bowed blouse and that gold watch she checked every few minutes as if time would expire before the pure metal would rust. I take it you've been here before. She didn't bother to look at him as she spoke. Inochi likes to spoil his directors. He tries to have us meet outside the office at least once a month for lunches like this, Temari stated plainly, glancing around briefly and sighing, as if the shimmering theme of the place didn't hold her interest. From pure observation she looked like she would rather be anywhere, but here. Somehow that does sound like him. He sighed and leaned back, relaxing into the thought, he's very generous. That he is, she agreed and lifted the GL to her lips, a sip, leaving behind a perfect imprint of the red lipstick. He had been half convinced the color had never been a paint but a permanent shade to her skin. Where to start? What angle to pick at? Where could he find just the slight crack that would break down that damn sheet of ice over her? Where was the fire now? Temari took the lead before he could decide. You don't seem to like your entitlement much, do you? Direct and jumping no bushes, she went straight for his endgame. It has its pros and cons, he muttered, going for his water, washing down his mouthful and waiting out tea. He obvious hit at him. Entitlement was a blessing and a curse, just like a Monday morning. Yes, and the mocking began, because being loaded is such a HLE. It's not just money. He shifted, just enough to show the discomfort to the thought, it's the expectation to keep at such a pace, it's, quote, troublesome, she offered. Exactly. He nodded, fighting between forcing his unease to face her narrowed gaze set on him or turning away. And before you ask or decide on your own, this conversation is only going to be between us, he decided to face her. I'm a firm believer in keeping secure. ETS with my friends. We aren't friends. Yet. Talking back just enough to prompt her need to strike back, shifting to sit straighter and fight him head on as well. Why would I want to be your friend, Nara? Entertaining his attempt, he threw himself at the crack, an opening made and taking the opportunity with a smirk. You know, I thought I told you to sell yourself to me. Make me want to help you out, not the other way around. Quote, how bold of you to use my care enough to try, she scoffed at his audacity. You cared enough to apologize. He didn't bother to flinch now at the reminder, gaining a step ahead of her, he played this out like a match. You hardly seem interested in marketing anyways, why should I make time for you? He knew she wouldn't fold, but as his uncle had said on his first day, it was time to step up. You haven't even given me a chance to show you anything, he pointed out, her eyes rolled and he now had to hold her interest long enough to get her to listen. But seeing as I did convince you to have lunch with me means I've got some raw talent. You practically threatened me with it, on the verge of a hiss, that tense coiling more on her shoulders, absently peeking at her chest as it heaved with her inhale. A bit harsh, he sighed, eyes set around them now, glancing at known faces to calm the defense. You know, you still haven't apologized for spilling coffee on me. It was an accident, she growled under her breath. I was late and had that stupid tear in my stocking. I wasn't even looking when I stepped into you. A mistake. Finally, she admits it, he smirked. She opened her mouth, quickly shut it and let him have the win under the glare, almost as if she was forcing it. To answer your previous question, I know everything I need to know about the business. It's all my old man and uncles used to talk about when I was a kid. He blew out a breath. It was such a drag, but I figured it'd be a safe path to follow rather than try and learn something else. How uninspiring of you, she deadpanned. It's not the whole reason, it's just more logical to follow in the steps you know versus the unknown. Well, don't you sound like a modern day Shakespeare? If she wanted to throw shots, then he could fire back just as quickly. I was thinking more Poe, he hummed, for the mysterious side to it. The grin she fought was quickly blown out and hidden behind the GL again, playing it off as nothing. He focused on the red stain briefly before returning to the task at hand. Listen, people talk, he took a breath as he said it, readying to ask for help, a lot, and you've been praised just as much as you've been complained about. His hesitation made known, by accident, and she stared back to pick apart his reason, but I don't know how you do things, because you've been purposely hiding me all of last week and I didn't want to anything until I got to know you better. Quote, so what? You've been sizing me up. To put it simply, yes. Rumors about you are very harsh. At first introduction you're not that likable. Her eyes narrowed harder back, but he quickly settled the fire by clearing his throat, but our clients love you for some reason. I just want to know why, since you've been keeping me out of meetings all week. Not by mistake, she had taken the little nuisance of him and tucked it away in a corner to be dealt with later. Her week back had been planned to the minute and he'd just been the unwanted addition to her schedule. No way she'd make it easy for him to pick at her, so like a negotiation she tore apart her opponent with a subtle smirk. Ah, she drew out in a mockingly sweet tone, his glare darkened, you want to get to know me and my deepest darkest secrets, how fairytale of you, finishing off with a scoff. We're partners not lovers, dear. Either way you're trouble, she grinned back at the accusation, as if pleased with herself, and as much of a pain as this is, if we are to work together we have to at least be able to tolerate the other. Quote, I don't tolerate, she smirked, throwing a shot, I mock. I've noticed, he glanced down at her bare knees still kicking impatiently since the start of their conversation, why do you want to be CEO anyways? Quote, why does anyone want a promotion? She countered, offering a false smile back now, to be known as the best, obviously. Ambitious, but why? Another counter against her, wanting more. His voice had long shifted, a subtle lower on his tone, eyes set and focused, it almost unnerved her how tense it got, you're just signing yourself up for more work. His shrug to the statement met with an irritated bounce of her crossed leg. Work does not scare me, she scoffed, judgment made in looking away, I've been working since I was 15, so this pace is nothing new to me. Quote, back in Suna too. Her eyes shifted dangerously back at him, a little too close to home with the mention. Someone's been peeking into my personal file, now it really does sound like you're stalking me. His eyes rolled, his posture further relaxing into the chair. Perks of having friends in high places, he shrugged. You aren't the only person here who has a hidden hand, Nara. Watch yourself. His brow furrowed, staring back at her threat, searching that puzzle, seeing how defensive the mention made her. Put in a corner, she bared fangs to defend herself, the topic enough to make him nod and be more direct, beating around the bush wasn't going to cut it. Do you always have something to say? Wore you down enough, didn't it? Scaring him enough to take the lead now, and this is the part where I tell you that I want to be CEO, because I have earned the right to be at the top, want credentials, look at my achievements, want a plain overlook, look at my reputation. I might be considered cruel, but I get results. He seemed unimpressed with the statement, her head held high and boosting, slowly she needed to work an emotion into his face, to feel it. You want a sob story to pull at your heartstrings? Is that what you want? Well, here you go, eyes dangerously locked with his, catching his slow narrow as she spilled enough to hook him in. I was 16 when I moved to Konoha with my 2 younger brothers. I raised them alone while doing my college clees at night so that I could work 3 jobs and still barely afford to live in the shittiest part of Southside. She scoffed, bitter now, so work does not scare me. If Inochi wants me to bring the moon to him, then goddamn it, I will figure out how to do it, because he helped me when no one else would. He gave me a purpose. Now decide, her gaze sharpened, he tensed slightly under it, if you even deserve to be mentioned near me and my ambition goals after you. They've been spoon-fed into the very position that people spend years dreaming about. She grabbed her purse and stood, the rough edge returned, your precious entitlement to what you call more work is everything to some people. Quote. Temari, wait, jumping from the chair just enough to catch her arm and stop her from escaping, he worked quickly to pull her back. I didn't mean to upset you, I'm sorry. I am not upset. I'm pissed. She jerked her arm from his hand, quickly aware of her surroundings and lowering back down. To sit, leaning closer to him, a finger pointing, don't ever question why I do something, especially when it comes to business. Leaning away, taking some of the heat with her, she blew out a frustrated breath. He hadn't meant to, but he had uncovered something dangerous with his first move to aid her that Friday. And being wrong pissed her off. I didn't mean to, he muttered, rubbing the back of his head, hiding his nerves well enough under the stare. As if she was picking at his very soul and determining if he was even worth another second of her time. God, you're just like him, she sighed annoyingly and looked away. Like who? Now he was just confused. Inochi, Temari groaned and leaned back in the chair. Your uncle only sees the good in people, and it's annoying sometimes, because I'm the opposite, all I can see is the worst in somebody. What's that supposed to mean? Quote. It means that I've got a lot more pull in the company than you think, she huffed, relaxing her shoulders, still feeling tense, but confessing to someone who she knew was close to her boss helped. I can do more good at the top than I can at the bottom, that's why I want that promotion, I want to make a difference. She scoffed and leaned back, crossing her legs again, considering for only a few seconds before confessing, right now I'm pulling too many strings, managing too much, and it's a big factor in why I've been stressed. She glanced away briefly, among other things. Quote. I'm going to Yum, he began carefully, keeping up with her pace, my presence didn't help much. You showed up at the worst possible moment, she huffed, like deploying a cadet in the middle of an active battlefield, you've been stuck in the crossfires of a possible threat to the company. She forced a bitter smile, still carrying that prick on her shoulder even now. And the absolute cherry on top of this cake was that you were the one to accidentally discover it. So when you say threat, quote, I mean, without you something bad would have happened, but we are going to fix that today. One swift look around the place, she made sure no one would witness her attempt as she sighed, forcing it through her teeth, I suppose we should thank you for helping us out. Quote, well, I had to impress the best somehow. Innocent enough, the more she gauged his intent, she begrudgingly accepted the challenge her boss had given her. You want to be partners? Fine, then show me you can do more than this. She waved a hand at him, gesturing to all of him, I'll give you AC hands to prove yourself when I say you're ready. One final scrutinizing look at him and she made her point, blunt. Just because you're entitled to the name of director doesn't mean shit if you don't know about what we do. Quote, fine, no point in arguing the small stuff, he simply nodded. Good, she huffed, leaning back and fixing her composure, flicking her watch to check the time. Now pay for lunch, we've got a meeting at 2 and you'll be coming with me to see this through. Quote, with Tayuya and Kakashi. She nodded, already on her heels and leading the way out, his quick strides to catch up with her lacking her grace, and speaking as he made it to her side, aren't meetings with the director's private affairs. She stopped, turning shortly to face him, his steps halted like screeching tires to not run into her. Are you my partner or not, Shikamaru? He didn't hesitate to agree, nodding quickly down to her. 2 it is. Leaving the restaurant, he took the stride she did, straight, but lacking her alert gaze as it shifted from one way to the other side of the sidewalk. He wondered briefly what she was thinking about, finding out before he could even finish the thought in his head. One more thing, she turned to face him, eyes locked, his backbone crumbling under the look and the way she jerked his tie down to meet her gaze. If you ever tell anyone about this or my personal life, I'll kick your. She stepped close enough where he could feel her warning with each word. And I don't mean figuratively, I mean literally kick your. Don't forget I am from Suna, but I grew up in Southside, and my people don't talk much with words over there, got that, Nara? He nodded stiffly, staring back at her threat with a drop of regret in attempting to go up against her. You know you're kinda scary. He managed a strained sounding mutter, further locked into the glare. Good, she flashed a smug toothless smirk, releasing him, I like my friends to be a little scared of me. That woman put his own mother to shame, an absolute nightmare, intimidating, and just downright mean for the fun of it. The rumors about her spreading from vicious attacks to lustful advances to those on top, a demon in heels and a walk that threatened war. As she turned to lead the way, his eyes dropped. He didn't bother to hide it, didn't bother to question it. Hidden behind a hooded lid, he trailed after the rhythmic sway of those burgundy hips for only as long as his sigh lasted. Simply turning and following her afterward to start his day as her shadow and find out which rumors had been true and which have been lies. One thing he could conclude from the conversation: the woman was devoted to her work beyond just titles and loyalty like that was hard to come by. Another point of interest: he couldn't wait to be her friend. Monday, 1:55 p.m. Shikamaru waited at those elevator doors 5 minutes before 2, making sure not to be late, not to disappoint his new partner on his first real task with her. Like a clock she was out. Those commanding steps, her presence announced with furious busy fingers working the keyboards on computers, everyone around looking busy and on task. Probably thinking Kiba should flip his desk phone so he actually looked like he was talking on it. Matsuri already lifting files for her as she trailed by her side and only stopping when the elevator dinged. As if the doors knew, they opened to her grand departure. A step in and she turned, looking down to the simple gold watch on her wrist, checking the time, before glaring a hole into the elevator doors, outwardly looking pissed. He stood back waiting, only stepping after she did and inhaling a breath of her fire to ready himself. Almost the same feeling he had when he stepped into the building on the first day. Inside this room a battle is about to occur. Her first comment made to reveal the unease he had been holding. Battle. Shikamaru raised a brow, the intense focus on the plain conference room door she had before warning him now turned to catch his confused look, the shades still mixing between blue and green. It's power play, Nara. And I always end up on top, so sit quietly, watch, and observe only. Think you can do that? Straight to the point, but it seems to work slower as he attempted to find where the caution came from. It's just a weekly update with the heads, the careful side-eye on him, watching for a mistake as he slowed his words and got the hint. Wanna be partners or not? She raised a brow, waiting for his nod, nodding to her like she wanted. You're going to have to trust me in here, this goes beyond just a simple meeting. So are you with me? I'm with you. Don't talk to anyone in there unless I tell you to. She slapped the folder into his chest, the Kiri budget he had finished ready to be used, but for what reason? Can I ask why? Because Tayuya will pick you apart like a cark, and Kakashi will find an angle to work on you. She paused and shrugged, if he has enough energy to. They seem harmless, but they are dangerous and you are a little fish between sharks right now. Quote. So the budget, he began, is your ticket to the top, she concluded for him. It shows promise since you put a little effort in. She gave him a firm nod, some of that confidence making his back straighten with her advice. Do this right and you'll be one of us, earn your mention. She wanted him above the others, acknowledged as a player and now a pawn, but what was her end goal with this? A test, perhaps. The warning she had spoken about earlier, a threat to the company and their savior had her sights set on a PLA. In looking conference room, what had the puzzle decided now? Are you always this intense? His mutter met with a short burst of energy, now amused by him. Why do you think they nicknamed me the cruel mistress? The sly grin back at him gave him the power to take a step after her and follow. Curious, I like to with people in the worst way possible. And you get to have a front row seat to why I'm the best employee in this company. Quote. The door opened to the conference room and she glided inside, the previous occupant looking up from her stack of folders to flash a smile, a gesture that was anything but friendly. Sabakuno, look at you, on time. Tayuya taunted her welcome, her eyes quickly darting to him as he followed behind, with her new rookie to boot. I wonder where you've been hiding this one all of last week. That doesn't concern you, Sakin. Not bothering to look at her, Temari kept her pace towards the back of the room. Ease Kakashi. Late as usual, Tayuya distracted from her main target and grinned at Shikamaru, waving red-clawed fingers at him. At first glance he could already pinpoint the click look of a rich and hungry independent woman. Made of plastic, dyed and sprayed on the outside, inside as vain and see-through as GL. Why does this happen every week? Temari huffed as she took her spot at the head of the table, the chair to her right pulled out for him as she ped. He didn't question, just followed, sitting and keeping the files she gave him safe in front as he awaited her plan to play out. You're just mad he's actually getting a lead on us with his big pitch last Wednesday. Finally, those dark brown eyes turned away from him, a little breath released as her target shifted to Temari. He got lucky because I couldn't be there to make the pitch myself. Temari shrugged, waving her off. I was busy. Quote, what's the excuse this time? Yuya sat back, awaiting a response. I know you wouldn't understand with how much free time you've taken out of the office lately. A statement that sounded more dangerous than it needed to be. Extra snappy today, her new target in her sights, Yuya just narrowed her eyes as she spoke to Shikamaru, as Temari had warned, picking apart at him like a cark. Sorry you have her work with her. Nara, you would have had a better time on my team than stuck with the cruel mistress. Quote, and now it got personal. Her fire sparked and Temari scoffed, slapping a hand on the table, loud, turning the attention back to her to begin the catfight. I might be cruel, dear, but that rat's nest you call hair is a threat to humanity. Quote, pop another button, Southside, maybe you'll make a sale. That was one time and it was an accident. Leaning forwards against the table, Yuya copied her and got closer. Cheap blouse trick, she scoffed, unconvinced. Yeah, an accident. Quote, don't be petty, Yuya, Temari tutted, taunting further, needing more anger. Clearly I just have a lot more to offer than you do. Bitch. Made with a sneer. Cunt. Made with a smile. A fourth entered to save Shikamaru from ducking under the table. Are you two still going on about the blouse incident? Kakashi sighed as he entered, a stack of folders balanced on one hand and a coffee in the other, shutting the door behind him with a foot. I wonder what a full malfunction might get us, ladies. Quote. Both women rolled their eyes at him, ignoring his obvious shot at them. Don't be a pervert, Kakashi. Temari leaned back into the chair, crossed legs bouncing under the table, impatient. Your husband might get jealous. A short chuckle to the strike and Kakashi slowed to look at Shikamaru, surprised to see him. What's the kid doing here? Don't mind him, he's just observing today. She waved him off and took her place at the head of the table, leading the meeting. Now, you start with your update on permissions from last week in order to get the funds we need for the Kiri brand so we can get them to production after their pitch on Tuesday. Kakashi and Temari exchanged a look before he spoke. All approved and it's a go for accounts, though. He glanced at Yuya with a blank look. Some of the numbers were off on the sheet I saw on Thursday. He emphasized, mainly budgeting from your department. Quote, don't blame me, Yuya scoffed, leaning back to cross her arms, lacking interest. Last quarter's new hires were useless and sent the wrong estimates to publishing. Admitting you didn't do your job, Temari glanced at her, mocking a pout. I did mine, but you're the final jump, Temari, so it's your people's fault for not checking everything. Shikamaru saw it, not ice, but fire behind the look as she straightened to sit. Defending her team right before his eyes as her opening was made. My people do their jobs flawlessly, they don't make mistakes, I make sure of it. Her grin turned downright sinister. In fact, my new partner managed to fix the mistake you made. What mistake? The look of confusion showed onto Yuya's face, unaware as Temari showed her hand. Nara. On cue Shikamaru sat straighter, holding the file in his hand. You sent the wrong estimates, Sakin, so he fixed them. He slid over the folder. Yuya practically jumped forward to snatch it and bring it to her. How the did you ever get these? Told you my people know what they're doing. Temari leaned back in the chair, awaiting the end. Look at you, singing your praises again, and yet none of your people appreciate it. Yuya mocked a look of pity at her, teal eyes slanted dangerously. All praise goes to Shikamaru, he did these edits, not me. Unimpressed by the attempt, she admitted, much easier now, at least I'm woman anew. To admit that. So the kid has value, Kakashi hummed from his side of the table, having been a silent observer and taking his time organizing the pile around him. Potential, she smirked, feeling Shikamaru roll his eyes beside her, but said on Kakashi, given the right motivation. Quote, a man after my own heart. Kakashi put a hand to his chest, peeking up at Shikamaru and chuckling as he continued his task. All you're going to do is work him into the ground. Tayuya put her own thoughts out there. Her file slapped to the polished oak table, and piercing dark look turned to Shikamaru. You won't even know what day it is once she's through with you, Nara. I do hope he can keep up with your high demands. Kakashi hummed his own thoughts while they fought in the background. I have standards, there's a difference, Hitaki. Temari glared back at him, softer than before. High standards, Kakashi corrected himself. With a tight smile, Temari flipped her folder opened, and went with her attack, to show them what her work last week had given her. An opening like no other. Now back to the matter. After we've discussed Sakin's failure, she kept talking before Tayuya could defend herself. I've been tasked to reach out to Sharingan Industries, and this time actually got word from one of the idiots that runs that place. Quote, that brings you one step closer to peace. Kakashi nodded along. Wait. Tayuya looked between the two, unaware of what had been going on behind her back. Since when are you working with Sharingan? Quote, I believe that falls into the category of none of your business. She returned her sneer with a subtle smirk. I have an insider on the matter, an ally if you will, it's why I was busy on Wednesday. She waited and Kakashi slowly chuckled as she grinned, meeting his gaze from across the table at her surprise. You didn't. You got Sasuke to open the dealing up for us. A look of concern flashed over Tayuya's face, as if this wasn't a part of the plan, a rumor now made a reality. We might actually partner with them. Entitled rich boys, my favorite targets. Leaning back in the chair, knowing her own rich boy was slowly fixing a glare at her, Temari took the victory and flashed him a smirk before entertaining the others. Since Itachi left last year to start his own firm, Sasuke had to step up, and I just so happened to be there with an offer he couldn't refuse. A partnership between our companies instead of a rivalry. She sighed. As fun as it was competing, an alliance would benefit our companies more than this TLE spat the old men have been having over the years. Does Inochi know? Tayuya asked, cautiously eyeing her. Why do you think he sent me over there? Temari rolled her eyes back to her. I'd gouge out my own eyes before I stepped foot into that building out of free will. A subtle smirk. It's too red in there, don't you think? A real eyesore. Tayuya darkened her eyes again, taking in Temari's casual look at the red hair and matching outfit, the observation ending on a threat the more they waited for the other to strike. You're taking on too much again, Temari. Kakashi hummed, warning her, his eyes still turned down to the stack. Too much would imply I can't do it, and since when do I turn down a challenge, Kakashi? Though she asked him, her gaze moved slightly over to her given challenge, the boss's not by blood nephew keeping up with the conversation with a subtle narrow in his eyes, focused and searching for her end game. Fair point. Kakashi nodded to her as she glanced back at him. I see you're ready for war. You're really stretching for that CEO role, aren't you? Tayuya huffed angrily. Well, I am very flexible. Temari flashed a sly red-framed smirk and winked at her, just the reaction she wanted. Seat. Hing anger. She picked it apart with a smile on her face, leaning against her palm sweetly spitting her venom. We all know it won't be you, Tayuya, so just accept your defeat now, dear. Be humble about it too, because you'll need that soon enough. Quote, you're gonna use the new kid to favor with Inochi, aren't you? And here I thought you wouldn't stoop that low to get ahead, Miss High and Mighty. Tayuya sneered and wrinkled her nose as Temari leaned against the table knitting her fingers before her, provoking with purpose. I do wonder what bothers you more, the fact that I was gifted his nephew or the fact that Inochi didn't bother to even look your way when he did it. One more push. I wonder why he did that. And she was hooked, claws snatched, ready to break her down into nothing, relying now on a desperate rumor to find an angle to work around the ice barrier. You know, I always did wonder why you spent so much time in Inochi's office these past few months. She glanced at Shikamaru, his own darkened glare met her grin, now I can see why. Quote, Tayuya, that was uncalled for, Kakashi warned, breaking his calm features to knit his brows together. She's from Southside, how else do you think she got here? A silent beat hit the room, anticipation for what she would do with the shot, but she did the unpredictable move. Temari hummed, calmly leaning back into her chair and letting the ice glaze over her, almost unimpressed by the attempt. Hell, she looked bored as she turned to face Kakashi. I was right from the start, wasn't I? Quote, "You were right to be suspicious." Kakashi nodded to her, offering a short-lived smile. "It's one of my favorite things about you, your lack of trust in others. They don't call me cruel for nothing." She flashed a grin and returned her attention to a confused Yuya, blunt and forceful in the attack. "You're fired." "What are you talking about? I know you heard me the first time. You can't fire me." She seemed confused as Temari said it, and now the frustration took over, snapping he. Our eyes on Kakashi. "Kakashi, did you find the damn warrant already?" He lifted a folder in hand as soon as she spoke and finally finished his organization to speak. "All right here, everything since the beginning of the year when she started." He slid over the folder with a red stamp across the top and pulled out his phone. Neji sent it up this morning along with the past few months' worth of budget reports from her department and certain members from Sharingan who helped her transfer the funds. Yuya looked between the two, fear flashing and set on Temari when she finally let out that held breath, irritated it took so long to get here. "Why do you think I got Hyuga to quit our department and go down to human resources, shortly after you started? To do a little digging on all those embezzlement charges you now have. Among other things," she added with a shrug, "you think we wouldn't notice you stealing from the very company we are supposed to be protecting." She leaned forward, barred smile in place. "We don't get even in Southside, bitch, we destroy you." Her attack just beginning, sinister in the brutal strikes, but calm in her tone. "You didn't just take out of the budget, you falsified the client's documents, almost creating a scandal in Rui Ning Ymi's reputation, and I didn't notice until after Shikamaru redid your budgets and found the missing money you took." She breathed a laugh. "So in a way he did more for this company in a week than you have in the 8 months you've been here." She glanced back at Shikamaru and let one slide, friendly if you tilted your head. "Good job, Nara." Despite the serious moment he almost let a little prideful smirk grow on his face, something done right by him. On cue the security team made their appearance to escort Yuya from the room, no fight back as the air cleared and only 3 were left. "You called it," Kakashi sighed, shutting the door behind them after the security team took her away. "Of course I did." Temari scoffed and crossed her arms, prideful in her own abilities. "I can smell a bad apple a mile away and she's been rotten since she got here. And good thing we didn't need to get the public involved. No scandal for the company." He strolled casually towards the two, Ice touch, Temari. "Better to keep all this just between the 3 of us." At her remark Kakashi leaned down and put a hand to Shikamaru's shoulder. "Welcome to the club, kid. This is what directors do." Kakashi chuckled, letting him go. "We weed out all the bad seeds before they start to sprout and become a problem. Don't take all the credit now, Kakashi." Temari straightened for her mention. "And get in your way. Wouldn't dream of it, dear." He winked at her and strolled back to his mess of files and evidence, glancing back at her. "I'll go ahead and inform Tsunade about our success here and what of Yuya's replacement. You said you had that covered. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised to see who I picked to take her spot." Rising from her seat, a smug grin in place, Kakashi chuckled and nodded to her. "Shall we pick this up tomorrow morning with our new hire then?" She glanced back at Shikamaru. "We'll see you at 10. Her subtle smile fell, a warning to both. "Don't be late either of you." The final remark made the door opened and the two left. He didn't speak until the elevators opened, stuck between playing back the battle and the rumors going from one spot to another as he organized his thoughts in the silence. That was, Shikamaru pursed his lips as he followed her into the elevator, searching for a word. "Intense," she offered. "How did you?" He looked from the closed doors back to her. "No," she smirked, leaned past him to click on their floor. "You're smart, Nara, figure it out." It took him 2 floors before he realized. "Your eyes stand," he grinned, remembering his first day, how she had told the young woman to steal the report in the first place. The report that revealed who had been sneaking money from clients for the past couple of months. Eye stants are rather useful, aren't they? A cynical approach to catching someone red-handed. Why did he admire it so much? No argument there. He wondered if Kiba would offer him anything beyond simple water cooler gossip. "Matsuri is a very curious girl. That's why I hired her." The pause in her voice only lasted for a floor, an unexpected softer tone. that and I used to babysit her when she was a kid, so I know she's got a good head on her. A crack, just opening a tempting promise. Story for another time, she hummed to his question, considering. You'll have to earn that story. A little challenge to bother him, leaning just enough to face her. Is this how you treat all your friends? We still aren't friends. She glanced at him, just a twitch to show a smirk as the bell rung, but you can keep trying. And those heels led, her eyes stand already at her side following along with updates. Only glancing once back at Shikamaru with a quiet smile, hiding the secret he picked up on. Reminded how that morning the report had been sitting at his desk, waiting for him to finish it, and whoever had put it there was probably walking at her boss's side with a tablet in hand. Troublesome, but at least her intentions were pure. Haruno. Maybe. Yes, Miss Sabakuno. Sakura stood at the ready, stiffening as Temari halted her steps before her, the entire office still and watching. You're fired from my department. No pause, no holding back, ripping off whatever bandage was there. Shikamaru grimaced, definitely lacking the soft hand. The team around them stuck between shock and silent horror at such an unprovoked attack, their boss a sheet of indifference as she sighed in. Continued. Tomorrow when you come back into work you won't be coming to our floor, you'll be going to floor 16. It took Sakura a moment to break through her shock only enough to speak. That's Miss Sakin's department. Quote. It was her department, now it's yours. She extended her hand, Sakura slowly lifting hers to shake, confused for just a moment, the realization quickly making her gasp as Temari shook her hand. Welcome to the big leagues, Miss Haruno, you're one of us now. Quote. Thank you, Miss Sabakuno. You may call me Temari. A short grin and she turned to head off to her office, Matsuri flashing a wink as she trailed after her boss and ducked into the room with her. The door shut and the silence lasted as long as the shock remained. Quickly the team gathered around praising and congratulating Sakura. Making his way past the crowd, he headed for his office, taking in the day so far, exciting as it had been difficult to pull through, a day filled with promises and a better tomorrow. Hey, you have a message, Shikamaru, Kiba trailed by his side, both moving at the same pace as he updated his boss. Someone named Shiho. The airflow of the office space suddenly thickened. Shit, he had forgotten. Making a quick step past Kiba he went to his office, turning back to close the door and keep Kiba out. Don't worry about it, I'll handle it. Shutting the door behind himself, Shikamaru went for his phone, internally wincing as he lifted it to his ear. Hey, my assistant said you called. Yeah, a few times actually. He already played out the conversation in his head, citing as she asked, why didn't you pick up? I'm at work, I can't just answer you whenever you call, Shiho. Quote. You forgot, didn't you? He was right, he would wince, putting a hand over his eyes as he sighed, ready to just get through it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, but I had a meeting during lunch and I had to finalize something before then. He wasn't entirely lying. At noon he had a meeting, one that would finally solidify some type of true partnership with the woman one door down. Rough still, but at least he knew her intentions were in the right place. Well, I wish you told me before I got there and waited for you. He could feel the unease of his mistake crawl up his spine. He might have really messed up here. I'm really sorry, it was an honest mistake. I promise I'll make it up to you. Lines rehearsed as he took a look out his window to find some sense of relief in the busy sidewalks below to distract from the full force of her disappointment. Fine. Women were never just fine. What about tonight? Are we still up for dinner at 6 with Inouen? Her new boyfriend. She sighed. He followed on his end. She's been bugging me all day about you. Yeah, I'll be there. Don't be late. He heard the warning, an unfortunate habit of his, cursed to be late no matter how hard he tried. I won't be. He tried to make the promise, but his sights fell behind him as Kiba knocked and entered, ruffled and still tense after a certain woman spoke to him. Hey Shikamaru, Miss Subakuno wants to see you. Lowering his phone just enough to answer back, interrupted as the click of those heels ped by his door, calling into the room as she did. Matsuri at her back carrying a stack of files with great effort for her small frame. Hurry up, Nara, we don't have all day. Shikamaru. He brought the phone back up. I'll call you later, alright. He dropped the phone before he could hear any more and gave himself time to take a single breath and find out what unpredictable move the woman before him was making. All day for what? He followed her into the conference room, 4 boards in various points and pictures spread across the whiteboards. The Kiri deal sprawled out before him in a mess of beige stacks in various points. Everything that budget had held was nothing compared to the work that sat before him. At the front of the mess, hands at her hips and looking around the room with admiration, Temari smirked as she looked back at him. Your first real test. Another stack of files crashed onto the desk, Matsuri huffing as she finally got to release the heavy load. Time to get thrown into the deep end, partner. Temari nudged her head to her eye stand to make her leave, and as the door shut she took in his wide gaze and gave him the time to comprehend the load. That's a lot. The only comment worth mentioning is he peeked into a stack and flipped through the pages. That's just one project. Sometimes we balance out more than one. That's why we have teams to help with the workload. She shrugged and put a hand to the top of the stack, almost gentle in the way she held all her hard work over the past couple of weeks, tapping her nails briefly on the top. So, you've read every single guideline in that binder, right? Those eyes followed him, expectant and focused. I've got a photographic memory. Trust me, I know that book start to finish. Inochi had mentioned he would be useful, but this little surprise was hard to hide, taking in the new informatio. And in his curious look as he walked about the work, taking in her thoughts and ideas with great interest. She only allowed a few seconds to let him have the time of day before she forced the purpose of the meeting. Well, all that knowledge is useless if you don't know how to apply it, so you have to keep up with my high standards here. You want to learn from the best, this is how you start. Show me you're not all talk and I'll make you the second best. She breezed past him towards the boards, looking back to make sure he was on her. Want me to show you how it's done? What are you gonna pitch me for practice? He raised a curious brow to the question, trying to find a way around the mess she gave him. I don't need to practice. She threw back her strike, getting him where she wanted him, but it'll keep you from making that stupid face you do when I say something you don't expect. 1, 2, 3. I don't make a face. Confusion set in and she sighed at the expected look. That one right there. She pointed back to him, unimpressed. Stupid. You're a mean woman. Stop being such a crybaby and focus. She emphasized her point by pointing to the board again. During my pitches I like to hook people into a story, make them feel something, not just talk about numbers and potential audiences. I want these people to feel whatever I want them to feel during whatever production we are doing. She smirked, crossing her arms and mentioning herself in a prideful way. For example, last week when I pitched our clients' team members from Kiri, I made those men feel powerful. The image I created was them being on top of the world, all for a drink that tastes like shit. Quote, you inspired a dream, he concluded. And controlled the reality. She nodded, looking across her vast workload knowing there was never really an end to it. It's my take on how to keep customers coming back for more, my little secret tip if you will. She peeked at him, his sights still set past her at one of the boards, testing just enough to make herself feel it. That is why they nicknamed me mistress around here, because I control every room I walk into. Adding with a heavy sigh at the end, one rumor that bothered her above the others. Although some people seem to lack the knowledge that mistress had 2 different definitions. Something unexpected vibrated in the quiet room. He laughed, hiding the sound behind the back of his hand and looking away from her for a second as he coughed to clear the amusement, somehow settling her mention with his own. If you've ever seen my uncle and aunt in the same room together you'd understand why I didn't believe a word to you said. She entertained the light breeze between them. Unfortunately, I have. She internally shuddered at the reminder. Christmas party 2 years ago, it was like watching a slow-motion porno without the happy ending. He nodded his agreement, taking in her CR comparison without the stupid look she had mentioned. With a sigh, she broke from her stance and glanced back at him. Tomorrow you will join me in the Kiri deal. Think you can manage? She motioned around the room with a finger. This. Quote, I just watched you tear a woman limb from limb. If tomorrow is going to be anything like that I think I'll survive. Take note, that's what happens when someone messes with this company. Her cruelty praised and she carried the little boost in her ego. No tilt needed to sound friendlier, more approachable. Like I said, Inochi is too nice. He doesn't see bad things in people. It's admirable, she admitted with a sigh, but you can't trust in it, so we trust the CEO. It's what Tsunade does, she is the shadow at his back, making sure nothing can harm us. The quiet paean in her voice, as if a solemn reminder to the path she pursued herself. Make sure you read everything here, she pointed at one of the stacks, tapping a nail on it. It shouldn't be too hard for a self-proclaimed genius such as yourself. I want it done by tomorrow at 10. Our meeting with the Kiri team won't just be with the company's lackeys, but the big CEO himself, Kisame Hoshigaki. That's going to take all night. Looking from the pile to her, he realized this was the torture she had promised, almost as if she had been a STEP ahead of him earlier in the day. It's only 4. You can sacrifice a few hours of your precious sleep for me, your partner. That fanged grin returned, taunting a challenge right in front of him, can't you? He was almost ashamed of himself for pathetically giving in on the first move. Her smirk glinted and she walked past him, taking her win at his acceptance and moving away with purpose. You wanted to learn from the best, she shrugged and stepped away from him to the door, looking back, so you'll have to try harder if you want to consider me a friend, Shikamaru. Leaving the parting words behind, her challenge set on the table, he sighed and grabbed the stack, starting on the first page, and like the past 6 years he dived into the work, and as much of a drag as it was he would not disappoint. NT. A promise of friendship, a little motivation to make things less troublesome. Inspiring the dream and controlling the reality. Monday, 6:32 p.m. He was late. Where have you been? You're late. Ino first to scold, at her side a man he'd never met before, and to their side a quietly seething woman who wore her form-fitting blush rose dress with a hard look on her delicate face. Shiho didn't get mad often, but he knew it from a mile away, possibly the 5th time since they decided in a relationship instead of curious looks to the other. Of course he had to swallow down an approach first a year back, but as time went on she started to gain some of her footing and stand on her own. I'm not that late. He checked his watch and winced. Half an hour was pushing his luck, but he hadn't. T looked up since he rushed out of that office space. Not necessarily forgetting about the dinner, but too engrossed in the files she had put before him, in more ways than one. They weren't just finished works she had given, ready to deliver the presentation, they were her personal notes. Page upon page of red ink swiped on from her pen, not an ounce of space left untouched. Line upon lines of angry red written in a harsh way, punishing the paper it had been printed on. Not the typical cute woman's touch, with their soft curls and little dots, but someone who had fought a battle on paper, leaving behind the blood of the victims in her wake. A walking horror show that people came to willingly get scared from, and he got to witness it firsthand. Lost somewhere after the second stack, he had just managed to get out of that building in time to not entirely it up. Somewhere in between his second GL of scotch and Ino's tantalizing tale of her time in Kumo with her foreign boyfriend, all small smiles and perfect hair, Shikamaru began to drift off, fighting a yawn. Playing with the rim of the CL and observing the way his finger got wet from the spot he drank from, he could have sworn he saw a red lip mark on his cup during a slow blink. The image playing out of full-blood red lips taking the GL between them, sipping carefully, leaving behind its mark on EGL and the wet tongue to peek out and collect the rest. He could feel his throat get parched, coming back to his senses quickly and taking a sip from his drink as he picked up on Ino's time in Iwa's photo shoots, faking a look of interest at her when she threw that award-winning smile at the group. Shiho at his side leaned back and engrossed in her tale with a stiffness in her shoulders. He was sure he checked his watch several times in the span of the same minute, Ino chirping about her time in Kiri now alongside her boyfriend, the two close and exchanging longing looks at the other. And to make the night a grand event, the lovers made a scene like no other. Internally he groaned as Ino squealed, unhinged in his books, but knowing this moment was both a blessing and a curse. His not-by-blood sister getting what she had always dreamed about, the man, the best career, and the troublesome love story ending. He could feel it, Shiho's subtle glances made in envy, and that final stare down after they left the restaurant and got home was enough to finally break her to ask as they made it to their apartment. So, Ino mentioned your parents' lake house this weekend, are you planning to go? Starting out calm, he could just detect that lower tone in the back, forcing to sound worse as he sighed, dragging his steps down the hall. I'd rather not go. You can't keep hiding away from your parents, Shikamaru. A subtle flinch in his shoulders at the quick lash, no beating around the bush with this one tonight. Caught. He blew out the breath he had been holding since he left the restaurant. I'm not. He hoped he could hear the tired warning he put into it. I just don't want to go. You mean you don't want me to go? And there it was, the forced path he had been dreading. He already knew his life with her, planned out from start to finish all the way up to those damned Graveston. Sitting side by side in his family's property. That is not it, Shiho. He stopped and faced her, looking down his nose as she made the predicted remark. I knew you weren't ready to move in with me. It only took a month before the woman realized dreams weren't all fairy tales and rose petals. No, they were troublesome nightmares covered in swamps and rocks in your shoes, women in red and lipstick staining glees. Life was not gentle or forgiving, it killed people, it hurt those around you, it roared in your face and spat at your very existence. Finding meaningless words to be a drag and smiles to be harsher than thought possible. His first win, his first mention, like a fire sparked under his to seek more from the path chosen for him, he might have not had a choice in it, but he sure as hell wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing high crumble under the pressure now. Look at me, his voice gentler, softer around the edges, almost hiding the raspy drawl to it, brushing away all his own frustration to calm the insecurity he knew she had. A quiet heiress who had been left time and time again by her own rich parents who couldn't be bothered with their only child had finally found someone who gave her the time of day. She was exactly what he had asked for as a kid, a simple woman who could make a good wife, a couple of kids that old later on take his position in the family circle so that he could retire out his days doing nothing. No one to bother him, no one to push him in a new path to follow, just him and his own thoughts, his own choices after that. Though now he supposed he had to take in another's thoughts to appease the cycle of repetition life expected from him. We're in no rush, Shiho. That's all, he added with a tense shrug in his shoulders, and no woman should have to deal with my mother without a signed waiver form at the bare minimum. Fine, a mutter, not pleased, not convinced enough. I'll make it up to you, he suggested, the hidden grin showing when she huffed and crossed her arms, cute, but not lacking in her own knowledge. You can't win every argument with Shikamaru. Sure, he smirked at her quick catch-up, but you're already thinking about forgiving me for today, so is that a yes? Only if we go this weekend. An ultimatum. She wasn't normally this stubborn, unyielding even in her cute stance to seem intimidating, lacking crossed thin arms and glaring back at him, not entirely new, but something unexpected. Why did he find it so tempting? Arguing against him and trying to be a step ahead, so he gave in on the first move. Fine, we'll go, he nodded once, agreeing to finally break the seal and just get it over with. Already playing out the entirety of Saturday in his head as he unlocked their new apartment and flicked the light on. Pleased with her given win, Shiho stepped in and took off each of her heels at the door, just managing to step barefoot on the ground before he came from behind and wrapped his arms around her waist, bringing her close to him. I've got some work to do, but maybe we could have some fun before that. You want to apologize for skipping out on lunch. Out of all the things life had to offer, this was one of the ones he didn't mind excelling at, willingly, troublesome. Going nowhere near. Very much. He already had his lips at her neck, blonde straight hair brushed aside and dragging his hands at her slim waist to bring her closer. Like putty in his hands, she gave out on the first move, no fighting back, easy, one turn and his lips took hers. Quick in settling a soft yearning pace and moving whenever he did, leading the slow dance to their room, shirt lost, dress dropped, hands careful to guide against her slim frame, gripping at her hips to just feel closer to the promise of ecstasy if he went in now. Something fueled his lean against her, pushing her back into the bed and dragging the taste of her pink gloss down her neck and towards her chest. Not lacking, but not as pushed together as he clawed at the bra and took it into his mouth. Shikamaru, a gasp in surprise, slow down. The command lacked authority and he simply moved from one to the other. Another gasp turned higher up and her voice made in a choked moan. lips dragging down and towards the thin strip of cloth she called underwear, pulled off in the same moment his lips made contact with hers. Like a symphony made live, she fought to stay quiet, always losing at that last flick and arching back into the bed when his final move was made, 2 fingers catching at the last moment, stroking only once to coax the orgasm to its limit. 1. Holding her legs, gentle in his touch, he gave just the briefest of precious moments before he dipped down again and she flinched back. Shikamaru, what are you doing? Shiho gasped again, fighting between the ecstasy and the nerves on him when he began the build-up for a second. This time stroking softer and carefully, observing the plane of her body as he fixated on the quiver of those pink lips, shining in the shadows of the dark. Finishing off with a deeper grind of his tongue into her, taking her attempts to stay silent with a little smirk. 2. She was done, he couldn't apologize any better way than this, and when he rose away from the shuddering form, his member finally came back into focus. 1 more, I don't think I can, she panted looking up to him as he hovered over her, encouraging with a tease at her entrance, wet. I think you can, taking her attempt in his mouth, pulling just enough back from crushing her under his form, he only gave a firm press to announce his return and pulled away to grab those pesky condoms. Returning, he gave one swipe of his gaze and determined where to start, paths to pick, and he chose the one that spoke to him, the sway of those hips. Drunk in the thought, he moved her to him, more pliable now that she had been tempered down, the chip she had carried during the day, gone. Face down and whimpering, trying to stay silent even now, barely catching the messed up sheet on her hands as he slowed his impatience. Dragging a hand down her spine, tickling the bone as he slid into her, forced to slow and consider now, gentle in his connection and the way he treated this posit. Ion. He knew her body inside and out, only needing one night to find how easy it was to push her buttons, a simple guide for her happy ending. Drawing back, he settled on slow, using her previous sensitivity to stir the finale on her end, barely able to contain his own patience during the tasting. Her, a favorite pastime she had grown to enjoy when he put the effort in. And when she said his name, a mew of warming bliss, that dreamed up ending that was his life became a reality. Shikamaru. The way Temari had said his name, as if it sounded foreign to his ears, drawing him in like a fish on a hook to find the source of the accent. It made him curious, like an unexpected gift dropped at his feet, containing a promise of a bomb instead of sweets. He almost didn't notice he had been riding the frustrations in reality, rocking Shiho off himself with unexpected vigor, her cries for more hidden in the sheets, and when he forced a third to peek inside her, he finally allowed himself to release the focus and come as she did. Buried deep and nearly tipping over her as she rode the high longer than he did. Even her screams sounded cute. The release met with a fuzzy clarity as he came down and laid at her side, taking only the time it took him to breathe easier to speak. Am I forgiven? Apology accepted, she panted beside him, her hand continuing the shake on his chest until he calmed it in his own, taking a few moments to calm himself before the thoughts returned and the headache began. Troublesome. Where are you going? Already up and dressing for decency, he looked back to remind her. I told you I had work to do, he returned to her, against the mattress on his hands, to place a quick roaring kiss to her lips. I won't be long. Quote. His promise made, but lacking in the end as he settled before the work Temari had given him. Cigarette hung from the corner of his lips, and knowing he'd get scolded for the smell around the apartment later as he dove into the deep end. Grabbing the next file, he winced once at the dark red brushstrokes of her handwriting. It wasn't even a team member's writing she was criticizing, it was her own. The notes made in anger, disappointed in her own mistakes and ideas, punishing herself with the color of wrath. Yet all he could do was read and memorize every line, if not for himself then for her. He couldn't disappoint this partnership, not for the title he was going to earn, he would be better and maybe he could earn that story his uncle had promised. Rough around the edges, a friend in the making, a new path opened for him to take on his own. Monday, 9:42 p.m. Temari nearly groaned as the long drawling speech of the day finally came to its end. Konkuro complaining about a shipment of bolts that had him all the way in the city limits searching the wrong address for half the day. I'm telling you, Mondays are a cursed day. Konkuro lifted his beer to her and shouted his complaint harder than she had the week before. Mondays. Quote, I hardly think that's a reason to wake up my neighbors. Kankuro, slapping her brother's arm to quiet him, she could already predict the elderly woman who lived below. She would complain in the morning as she went to work, shouting Sunian back to Temari as she sighed and went about her way. Looking back to the phone, pushing at Kankuro's shoulder to get closer, she let her tone brighten and throw a smile into her words. Any good news on your end, Gara? Their youngest brother on speaker and listening to the eldest siblings squabble during their nightly call to check in on the other. Well, I did manage a perfect score on my physics exam, he sighed, a little softer in his rough voice. Lee helped me quite a bit with studying during the weekend. Kankuro nudged Temari's arm repeatedly and went to ask about the new friend Gara had talked about for a few weeks now, but she was quick to shove him away and keep her voice light. We are so proud of you. Way to go, kid, Kankuro chuckled, grinning down at the phone between them. All right, you have a good night, Gara. Call if you need us. Kankuro addressed the elephant in the room as soon as the phone blacked out. He's been hanging around that Lee kid a lot lately. They are just friends, Temari shrugged, looking back to her brother. With benefits, Kankuro winked at her groan. Hey, I was just friends with a lot of guys too. His suggestive brow lift prompted a roll of her eyes. What is it with you and teasing that kid? He's happy hanging out with people who like him for him. She scoffed and uselessly pushed at her brother, his large frame going nowhere. You know how hard it is for Gara to make friends. Well, I mean, you did raise him and you're about as emotionally unavailable as they come sometimes. Quote, they both threw mocking grins at the other and took her drinks back in her hands, beers and a shared dinner after work. So how's your partner? He took a swing from the bottle and smirked, throwing his arm around her shoulders to bring her to him. Did you kill him yet? Quote, no, she muttered and leaned against his side, her professional pinned hair let loose and messily edged around her shoulders now that she was alone and comfortable in her own home. He brother stopping by prompting 2 shared beers and a call to the youngest to brighten the shitty day. I'm giving him a chance, kinda have to now that he saved me and the company from a potential threat. Wow, he gasped, dramatically slow and instantly irritating her. Temari giving a guy a chance, pretty sure the world is ending. Quote, shut up. She swiped half-heartedly at his chest, getting a chuckle and quick pull away to make her fall in the spot he had been sitting on. Let me know if you kill him, I'll help you hide the body. He grabbed his jacket as he went for the door, her pace a step behind to watch him leave. Hey, don't forget to lock up and text me when you get home. Yeah, I know the rules, sis. He kissed her temple as he walked out into the hallway. Love ya. He waved back before making the sharp turn to run down the 3 flights of stairs. Love you too. The door shut, locked and braced, a sigh escaping her and the distant sound of sirens in Southside quickly drowned out by whatever movie Kankuro had picked to watch during the phone call. Alone, perched on the fire escape, window open to the breezy night air, the gust of it tickling her bare legs as she brought them up to her chest and fished out a cigarette from her hidden pack. Finally taking that drag she had been craving since walking out of the meeting earlier that day. Of all the rumors, she hated that one the most. Inochi had often been perceived as a charming man who threw flirtation in as a means to please the audience, but an actual affair like this had always brought a disgusting horror in her. The lies of the complacent had once been entertaining, until they became about her. She didn't care, but they could at least be a little more subtle in the ways they called her cruel. Lacking in the endless poetic possibilities as far as rumors went. Temari had seen it before, the absolute adoration for a woman, a man fawning day and night over his once-was model. Though even after her years and child she held the elegant appeal of an heiress, naturally aging like the petals from a frozen flower. Her daughter, Ino, a spitting image of her mother during her youth, on the verge of being too cheerful for any room, but with a hidden desire for trouble, something past her strict schedule as a model. Temari might have had drinks with her once after a company event, something about the plastic blue in her eyes warming as the night went on and she found admirable qualities worth a second look. They said models were stupid and vain, but this woman was as insightful as they came, not necessarily tripping away at her, but revealing enough that Temari considered her a friend that looked past the story. She's even considered getting drunk with her again and having fun like that one time. She lifted the cigarette back to her lips, calmly taking a drag and tensing when she heard the police car. In the distance, the noise growing distant and her body relaxed with some effort. Her father had once been like that, doting and in love as they would say. Her mother received nothing but praise and devotion, up until the day of her youngest brother's birth and her father's spiteful curses to the heavens for taking his wife away. He soon found comfort in a bottle and later it festered into a daily routine of abuse until she reached her breaking point. The only reason she had survived through most of it was her true uncle's solemn aid. Yoshimaru had managed to change the nightmares into dreams, ones that went beyond those beige tones of Suna. Up until she reached 14 and the cloud disappeared with his unexpected death, replaced by curses, hunger, and bruises that never went away. She inhaled, taking the smoke in and holding it long enough to harm her before releasing it with a pant. Bastard. To call her among the shitstorm she had been juggling, had boiled a new degree of her fire. Seeking forgiveness from something so unforgiving, something she couldn't forget even if she was sent to have a lobotomy. Bastard. And the only way she had survived it all this week was thanks to that damn entitled shit of a not blood-related nephew who had been stuck in her side like a thorn. NCE the moment that coffee had spilt on him. Temari considered giving up coffee right then and there. Bastard, she spat out loud, going for an angry final pull at the cigarette and smashing the end into the GL ashtray she kept outside her window. How dare he help her? How dare he save her? She did not need anyone. She liked being alone. She liked the silent nights where only sirens rang miles away and the neighbors' shouts could be heard from the first floor. She liked to sit alone at night and worry about her brother's whereabouts. She liked the silent torture she felt as the shadows played in the dark of night. She was used to liking the unknown, because of how good she's been at predicting it. It was safe enough and she was ready to fight back when needed. Him though, she couldn't predict, not entirely, seeking validation in his endeavor perhaps, maybe lying about it all, maybe just trying to find his way as she had once. It was like a challenge within a challenge. She was as curious as she was irritated and a part of her needed to know what his end game was. If there was one thing Temari wasn't, it was a quitter. She would figure this out and set her final judgment when she was ready. Until then the ice glazed over and she made her move when her brother texted back that he was home. With a final exhale, she licked her lips and pulled away from the closed and locked balcony, finally letting herself be done with the nightmares and go back to the dreams.